Chapter 184. Half a month later. Xueqi and the others came to a waterfall and settled down. The surrounding 100 miles were surrounded by forests, and the scenery was beautiful. Bei Xiao Wangjian, Han Shenbua, and Xiao Jinghong went to build the wooden houses. Jiang Shui and Huang Lianxin also began to choose suitable places to settle down. Xueqi looked at Xian Xianghua and said, "All right, we're even now. It's time for you to leave." He had saved Xian Xianghua and did not want to have anything to do with her anymore. Xian Xianghua stared at him and faintly said, "Do you really want me to leave?" "Yes," Xueqi said straightforwardly. With Xian Xianghua by his side, the others felt quite unnatural. Moreover, this fellow's hatred was simply too great, and who knew when enemies would attack. Hearing that, Xian Xianghua snorted and said, "Then I won't leave. Unless you come with me, I will impart the Tanhua sect's ultimate technique to you, allowing you to be invincible in the world for 1,000 years, and even giving you the position of the sect master in the future." These words were enough to move most people. After all, the Tanhua sect was once an existence that dominated the northern wilderness region. It had a deep foundation and could be ranked in the top 5 among the countless forces in the northern wilderness region. "Haha, are you thinking of luring me over so that the ancient Diablo can possess me?" Xueqi asked with a smile that did not seem like a smile. Ever since he was possessed by the evil spirit in the Tianxia map, he had become extremely sensitive to this matter. He didn't want to become the tragic main character in some kind of plot, allowing some expert to be reborn and rule over the world, living a happy life. Xian Xianghua looked at him deeply, causing his heart to palpitate. Holy shit! Could it be that he had guessed her thoughts? He immediately became alert and prepared to fight at any time. Xian Xianghua didn't say anything. She turned around and quickly disappeared into the forest. Daoya old man appeared beside Xueqi and said in amazement, "You are the first person who dared to speak to her like this and is still alive." Xueqi rolled his eyes and said, "It's my honor." He then asked, "How much do you know about her? Can you tell me about it?" Xian Xianghua seemed to have a good impression of him, but he felt that it was unreal. The dignified #1 person of the demonic path, someone who had lived for over 10,000 years, would fall in love with him? "I don't even dare to write that, okay?" Daoya old man immediately told him what he knew about Xian Xianghua. 10,000 years ago, the ancient Diablo fought with the hegemon sword emperor and was defeated time and time again. When he finally reached his peak, the hegemon sword emperor had already ascended, and he became the #1 in the world. He was a playboy by nature and had many wives and concubines. He had many children, and Xian Xianghua was one of them. The ancient Diablo king was very harsh to his children. Many of his children died suddenly while cultivating, and Xian Xianghua was one of the few who survived. The cruelest thing was that the ancient evil king forced each of his children to personally kill their own mothers before they ventured into the world and cast away the last shred of compassion in their hearts. Since then, a few more demons appeared in the northern wilderness region. Later on, the Holy Lands worked together to kill the ancient Diablo, returning peace to the northern wilderness region. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last long. In less than 2,000 years, Xian Xianghua's demonic technique was mastered, and she dominated the world, leading the Tanhua sect to new heights. She was even more cruel and tyrannical than the ancient Diablo. She brought disaster to the world and plunged the people into misery and suffering. Even the demon race had to avoid her. After that, it was the legend of Xian Xianghua's invincibility. Xueqi understood now. No wonder Xian Xianghua loved to make up stories about killing her parents. This old demonic woman's childhood must have been filled with trauma. Somehow, he felt a little sad for Xian Xianghua. This old demonic woman had never shown weakness before him. Even when she was severely injured, she was still arrogant. Behind her power, countless tears and blood were piled up. He quickly adjusted his emotions and said, "Let's be careful during this period of time. What if she sets a trap for us?" He was afraid that Xian Xianghua would lure a group of powerful cultivators from the righteous sects here. Moreover, he was the vice suzerain of the Tanhua sect, and if that happened, he would not be able to clear his name. Daoya old man nodded and said, "There are few people around here. You can focus on your cultivation." Xueqi had always wanted to focus on cultivation, but the world was unpredictable. There were always some things that changed his plans. After that, Xueqi walked to the lakeside and sat down. He gathered the ink for the Qianxia map in his right hand and began internalizing qi. He cultivated along the way. In half a month, he discovered another use of the Qianxia map. That was to store spirit energy. Zhou Xuanji could channel his spirit energy into the Qianxia map. If he expended too much spirit energy during a battle, the Qianxia map could provide him with spirit energy at any time. If he could store it every day, one day, he would have unlimited spirit energy. Now, he could rely on his many legendary swords to fight those at a higher stage than him. However, he did not have enough spirit energy, so he could not last long. The Qianxia map could solve this problem. No wonder the Qianxia map is so attractive. This is only one of its uses. TSK. Zhou Xuanji thought happily. This risk was worth it. In the following period of time, the group stayed at the same place. Daoya Old Man began to patrol Chongming Demon Monarch, the Little Black Snake, a big, small heir, and the three-eyed drought rodent. Their happy days had come to an end. Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Tsongjian, Bei Xiao Wangjian, and Huang Lianxin also began to cultivate diligently. Zhou Xuanji taught each of them a different sword technique. With his personal guidance, the speed at which the four of them improved their sword techniques greatly. Under Zhou Xuanji's forceful invitation, Jiang Shui cultivated with him every day. Because of the Qianxia map, her cultivation speed also increased. Although it was not as fast as Zhou Xuanji's 10 times increase, it was at least 3 times faster. Han Shenhua's cultivation had been completely restored, and he was now beginning to break through to a higher realm. The atmosphere of the whole team was very positive. In the blink of an eye, more than 2 months had passed. Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 5. After Xian Xianghua left, she never returned. Every half a month, Zhou Xuanji would send Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Tsongjian, and Han Shenhua out to gather information. 6,000 li away, there was a city that did not belong to any dynasty or empire. It was under the protection of a sect, and from there, one could understand the situation of the world. Currently, the 2 hottest topics were Emperor Yan of Zhou's ascension and Xueqi Cliff. The matter regarding the Qianxia map was exposed. Now that the entire world knew that the Qianxia map was hidden in Xueqi Cliff, many first-rate experts flocked to Xueqi Cliff. After Zhou Xuanji knew about it, he rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he escaped quickly. In addition, Xian Xianghua disappeared without a trace, and there was no more news about her. Time continued to pass. More than 3 months passed. Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 6, which made the others envious. The Qianxia map was indeed powerful. They were not jealous because Zhou Xuanji treated them really well after all. Whatever sword techniques they wanted to learn, Zhou Xuanji would not be stingy. However, before they learned a sword technique, they could not learn more. This day, Daoya Old Man suddenly sat down beside Zhou Xuanji and said softly, "I feel that something is wrong. When I divined your fates just now, I sensed someone else's divine will. Someone is watching you." Chapter 185. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes and glanced at him with a strange expression. Isn't this normal? He had so many enemies. Was there something wrong with divining him? Daoya Old Man frowned and said, "That divine sense is very powerful. There are not many people who can surpass me in the northern wilderness region. They are all powerful hermits or old immortals. No matter who they are, once they set their eyes on us, we will be at a disadvantage." Zhou Xuanji could hear his worry and comforted him. "Don't worry. If they can divine us, we will be found no matter where we go. It's better to focus on cultivation and increase our power." Daoya Old Man thought about it and nodded. But he was still worried, so he got up and left. He was prepared to set up a barrier around the area to block divine senses. Zhou Xuanji shook his head with a smile and continued to cultivate. All he wanted now was to break through to astral projection as soon as possible. When that time came, he would no longer have to hide. Jiang Shui walked over with a grilled fish and sat beside him. "Xuanji, eat some first," she said. With their cultivation, they could already abstain from food and did not need to eat. But they still loved the taste of food and could not give it up. Zhou Xuanji took the grilled fish and asked, "How's your cultivation going?" He took a bite. The fish skin was fragrant and crispy, and the meat was tender and smooth. The texture was excellent. This girl's cooking was getting better. Jiang Shui tucked her hair behind her ear and said, "The wood rejuvenation technique is a little difficult, but I'm confident that I can master it. When that time comes, I can heal you guys even faster." Zhou Xuanji smiled satisfactorily and patted her head. "You are already a qualified nanny." Jiang Shui blushed and stared at him. "I'm still a virgin. Don't talk nonsense." She looked at Zhou Xuanji with a tinge of resentment. "Why? Are you in a hurry to marry me?" Zhou Xuanji raised his brow and asked. Their relationship was already clear, but they had not broken through that barrier. After all, they were not married yet. Now that they were homeless, Zhou Xuanji did not dare to marry her. It was not that he was worried, but after marriage, the responsibilities and mentality would change. Moreover, they were still young. Cultivators pursued the path of immortality, but unlike mortals, they did not give birth to children and end their lives. "Humph, just you wait." Jiang Shui snorted. After that, she grabbed Zhou Xuanji's face and pulled it. "Stop fooling around. What if I get stuck by a fishbone?" A nascent soul realm cultivator was killed by a fishbone? Nonsense. The world is so big that nothing is too strange. You only know how to quibble. The two of them fooled around for a while, and only after Zhou Xuanji finished eating did Jiang Shui leave. She was prepared to roast some other wild game. Zhou Xuanji raised his right hand and created the Tianxia map again. He continued to study it. Every day, he would spend time studying the Tianxia map. The Tianxia map should not only be a support-type treasure. He hoped to discover its attacking methods. Spring passed and autumn came. 4 months passed. Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 7. At this rate, he would definitely be able to break through to the astral projection realm before Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended. Han Shenhua and Xiao Jinghong had also begun pushing for a breakthrough to leaving Aperture Realm, and the others had also made some progress in their cultivation. Jiang Shui, Huang Lianxin and Beixiao Wangjian were getting closer and closer to the spirit spring stage. With the three-eyed drought rodent around, they could always find all kinds of natural treasures. Coupled with the resources they obtained from the enemies, their cultivation speed was naturally fast. On this day, Zhou Xuanji began to break through to the 5th level of the Sword Qi Golden Body incantation. Flesh Sword. Daoya Old Man took out a giant cauldron and placed many spirit herbs into it. At the same time, he set up a formation around the cauldron to gather spiritual qi from the heavens and the earth. The others stopped their cultivation and came over to watch. "So many herbs. Can our master handle it?" Beixiao Wangjian asked worriedly. Just by looking at the natural treasures in the cauldron, his scalp felt numb. Zhou Xuanji stared at him and asked, "I can't." He immediately gave in and cried out, "You can definitely do it." The others burst out in laughter. They were not worried about Zhou Xuanji. His endurance was unparalleled. Despite the severe injuries he suffered previously, he still managed to pull through. Moreover, he had the Tianxia map in his hand. Soon, the cauldron boiled. Zhou Xuanji leaped into it and turned into a golden man instantly. Daoya Old Man stroked his long beard and muttered, "This time, he should be able to form a flesh sword. So many treasures are great nourishment. Even the princes of the empire cannot afford to enjoy them." Jiang Shui looked at Zhou Xuanji worriedly but did not speak. Great Zhou, the main hall of the royal palace. Zhou Yalong knelt on the ground with an ugly expression. "Do you know your mistake?" A majestic voice came from the front. A middle-aged man wearing a black dragon robe sat on the throne. He was handsome and had an indifferent look in his eyes. It was Emperor Yan of Zhou, the Emperor of Great Zhou. He was also the most powerful cultivator in Great Zhou. Facing his question, Zhou Yalong gritted his teeth and said, "I know my mistake." This time, he went to Xueqi Cliff without telling Emperor Yan of Zhou. In the end, he returned empty-handed, and 4 of his companions died. It must be known that those people were the successors of the empires or sanctums. He could not deny that he had something to do with their deaths. "We will ascend soon. By then, you will be the Emperor of Great Zhou. If Great Zhou dies in your hands, how will you face your ancestors? With Great Zhou's fate, you might not even have a good reincarnation. Everything must be done through your brain. Do you understand?" Emperor Yan of Zhou tapped his finger on the armrest and said with a stern tone. Zhou Yalong took a deep breath and said, "I will remember father's teachings." Great Shang severed ties with Haoqi alliance, and the little evil lord lost his manhood. We personally went to the Hanin divine sect, and they have agreed to marry Su Xianxian to you. She will be the empress of Great Zhou, and the day of your marriage will be the day of our ascension. Emperor Yan of Zhou continued to speak, and Zhou Yalong raised his head. He wanted to retort, but the words were stuck in his throat. He understood what Emperor Yan of Zhou meant. Great Zhou needed a backer. In Great Zhou, only the Sword Monarch and Shitan Chongsha are powerful enough, but they are not enough. Su Xianxian is the disciple of the sect lord of the Hanin divine sect. If you treat her well, the Hanin divine sect will not mistreat you. You can have many women, but the position of empress must be of great help to you. Emperor Yan of Zhou stared at Zhou Yalong and said seriously. Zhou Yalong felt bitter in his heart and thought, back then you married my mother for this purpose? Cultivate well and don't go out during this period of time. The Qilan's tendon will be sent to your residence soon. On the day of your ascension, Great Zhou will undergo a tribulation. As the crown prince, your burden is not light, Emperor Yan of Zhou said earnestly. Zhou Yalong could only nod in agreement. After he left, Shitan Chongsha entered the palace. Your Majesty, according to our investigations, Sword God Zhou and Xian Xianghua appeared at Xueqi Cliff and fought with the Huangquan twin devils and Chen, Tang, and Xian Wang. Shitan Chongsha knelt on the ground and said in a low voice. His eyes were filled with shock. In just a few years, Zhou Xuanji had grown to such a stage? Emperor Yan of Zhou squinted his eyes and said, do you still remember what we ordered you to do? I said to compete in strength, so I will compete in strength. A human and a demon stood facing each other, 10 meters apart. No one stood behind them. Chongming demon monarch grew taller, and the muscles all over his body bulged. His bull horns towered into the sky, and the domineering aura of a demon was fully revealed. He patted his chest and said proudly, my iron fists are invincible in Great Shang. Today, he was going to show Zhou Xuanji how powerful he was. How is it compared to Great Shang's Fury Buddha? Zhou Xuanji asked in a mocking tone, which made Chongming demon monarch's face fall immediately. Okay, I'm going to punch. Zhou Xuanji walked forward. Chongming demon monarch's eyes turned sharp and charged toward him as well. 10 meters was such a short distance for them. Both of them came up to each other almost in just one step. They punched almost at the same time. The powerful wind blew against everyone's face, and it hurt. With a loud bang, Zhou Xuanji and Chongming demon monarch's fists collided. The white dragon golden robe fluttered loudly. Zhou Xuanji's feet sank into the snow, and so did Chongming demon monarch. Both of them slid a step back. Not bad. You have great strength. Chongming demon monarch praised, but he felt a little guilty in his heart. Oh my! How can this guy be so strong? Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, take another punch from me. After that, he punched out with his left fist. Chongming demon monarch reacted quickly and punched out as well. Bomb! Chongming demon monarch was sent flying backward. His massive body slid dozens of meters in the air before he landed. After he landed, he slid backward for another 10 meters, leaving 2 long ravines on the snowy ground. His left arm was trembling, and he looked up at Zhou Xuanji in fear. How can it be? Chongming demon monarch swallowed his saliva and mumbled to himself. The others were dumbfounded too. In terms of strength, Zhou Xuanji was already on par with a 7th-ranked demon? And he was a bull demon. Zhou Xuanji shook his numb left hand and said with a smile, you have been training well recently. From tomorrow onwards, increase the intensity of your training. Having heard this, Chongming demon monarch became anxious immediately. I'm already suffering enough. I can't increase it anymore. He was lazy by nature, and his current state of cultivation was much better than before. Zhou Xuanji walked up to Jiang Shui and asked proudly, did I transform into Sword Handsome? Chapter 187. Handsome. As long as it's you, it's handsome, okay? Jiang Shui rolled her eyes at Zhou Xuanji and said half-heartedly. Zhao Tsongjian, Xiao Jinghong, and Bei Xiao Wangjian surrounded him and asked what sword technique it was. Zhou Xuanji's answer was an energy technique, which disappointed them immediately. All of them had their own cultivation techniques. If they were to recultivate their cultivation techniques, it would take too much time, and they could not afford to waste it. That's right, master. Emperor Yan of Zhou will ascend in 2 years. On that day, Zhou Yalong will marry Great Shang Su Xianxian. Zhao Zongjian suddenly remembered something and said to Zhou Xuanji. Not far away, the little black snake heard it and leaped over with a whoosh. Ha ha ha, I really crippled little evil prince? He was extremely excited. Xian Xianghua was supposed to be married to the little evil lord, but in the end, the marriage was changed. He instantly understood the reason and was filled with a sense of achievement. Zhou Xuanji rubbed his chin and said, Emperor Yan of Zhou wants to find a backer for Zhou Yalong. The Han divine sect was a first-rate faction, and was not inferior to the Xinhao sect or the Haoqi alliance. However, weren't they allied with the Great Shang dynasty? Were they not giving the Great Shang dynasty face by doing this? Xiao Jinghong asked, 2 years is enough for master to break through to the leaving aperture realm. Will you go then? Once Zhou Yalong ascended to the throne, he would definitely think of ways to take revenge on Zhou Xuanji. If they were to successfully get married and climb up the Han divine sect, it would be even more troublesome. Of course I'm going. I want Emperor Yan of Zhou to see me kill Zhou Yalong. Zhou Xuanji said calmly. He did not hold a grudge against Zhou Yalong, but he had to take revenge for Huang Lianxin. This was a promise. Moreover, without Huang Lianxin, there was no way Zhou Yalong would let him off. There were many things in this world that couldn't be explained with logic. A life for a life, an eye for an eye for an eye. Then we have to hurry up and cultivate. We can't be a burden to master. Northern Sword Valiant muttered with a serious expression. The little black snake said disdainfully, the one who's dragging us down the most is you. Our mistress's cultivation is about to surpass yours. Northern Sword Valiant blushed and glared at it. Zhou Xuanji ignored their bickering and left with Jiang Shui. He was in a good mood and decided to rest for a day. He would take Jiang Shui to enjoy the snowy scenery and spend some time alone. Daoya old man stood on the spot, thinking hard. Transforming one's body into a divine sword. Is there such a sword cultivation technique in this world? He really couldn't figure it out. He had only heard of this kind of cultivation method in legends. Legend had it that the ancient sword emperors could transform into divine swords and annihilate millions of enemies. Could Zhou Xuanji really be the reincarnation of an ancient sword emperor? It's over. Zhao Xian, this old man is ashamed to have let your child be possessed. As such, in the next few days, Daoya old man looked at Zhou Xuanji with a strange gaze. Until one day, Zhou Xuanji could not take it anymore and found him. After knowing what he was thinking, Zhou Xuanji felt quite speechless. How many times have you suspected that I've been possessed? He was too lazy to explain. Seeing his attitude, Daoya old man felt relieved. Judging from his bad temper, it was obvious that he had not been possessed. He was just like his mother. Inside a pavilion, Su Xianxian sat in front of the dressing table as a maid combed her hair. She looked at herself in the bronze mirror, her eyes a little blurred. Miss, what are you thinking about? The maid asked. As she spoke, she looked at Su Xianxian in the mirror and sighed in her heart. She's so beautiful. Great Shang's #1 beauty indeed. Su Xianxian sighed faintly and said, I feel lost. Even though I cultivate hard, I'm still a chess piece of the divine sect that can be used as a bargaining chip at any time. My face has really harmed me. The maid opened her eyes wide and said, How could it harm you? You are going to be the Empress of Great Zhou, the mother of the dynasty. Many women are envious of you. Great Zhou was an empire. As the Empress, she would be surrounded by fate and have a long lifespan. She might even ascend in the future. As a mortal, she did not even dare to have such a dream. Su Xianxian smiled and did not speak. She did not care about the Empress of Great Zhou. Somehow, the ugly face of the Phoenix Sword Emperor suddenly appeared in her mind. No, he should be called Sword God Zhou. Thinking back to the legend of Sword God Zhou, she envied him. She wanted to be like Sword God Zhou, to settle grudges with one slash. No one could restrain him. He even dared to kill the Empress of Great Zhou. Even Xinhao sect and Haoqi alliance dared to resist. That was true freedom. Sigh. She let out a heavy sigh and subconsciously reached out to touch her face. If she did not have this face, could she exchange it for freedom? In the blink of an eye, Zhou Xuanji was about to celebrate his 21st birthday. This morning, he opened his eyes and prepared to get out of bed. Jiang Shui hugged him like an octopus, and he could not free himself. Stupid girl, how old are you already? Why are you still hugging me like this? Zhou Xuanji stared at her. He remembered that when he was young, he was hugged by this girl to the point that he could not breathe. He felt a little anxious. Childhood trauma. Hearing his voice, Jiang Shui rubbed her eyes and got up slowly. She hugged him and said weakly, "It's so early in the morning, what are you doing?" She had just woken up from a dream. She was still in a daze, and she did not look like a cultivator at all. Zhou Xuanji said, "Nothing. I want to go out for a walk. You continue to sleep." "Forget it. I will get up and prepare for you to wash up." Jiang Shui mumbled before she got down from the bed and put on her outer clothes. Zhou Xuanji got up and put on the white dragon golden robe. After a while, the two of them went out. As soon as they walked out of the wooden hut, they saw Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, Chongming Demon Monarch, and the others huddled together, discussing something. "What is this? Kirin? Impossible. How could there be such a small qilin? It must be a divine beast. There's no demonic aura on it. It's so cute, don't scare it." "Kirin?" Zhou Xuanji and Jiang Shui heard him and were immediately interested. They held hands and walked over. Soon, Zhou Xuanji saw the qilin. It was only the size of a palm, and its entire body was crimson. It was small and cute. It had the head of a lion, the antlers of a deer, the eyes of a tiger, the body of a moose, the scales of a dragon, and the tail of an ox. Even though it was small, it still looked mighty. As soon as the qilin saw Zhou Xuanji, it leapt up and jumped into his arms, causing everyone to cry out in surprise. "Does this little guy know Master?" Xiao Jinghong asked curiously. The others also had the same guess. Zhou Xuanji touched the red qilin and looked curious. He could sense the intimacy the little guy had toward him. At this moment, Daoya Old Man walked over. When he saw the red qilin, his eyes widened. He rushed over and snatched the red qilin away. "Let me inspect it. You guys disperse first. Don't disturb me." Daoya Old Man turned around and left with the red qilin. The red qilin cried out with a tender voice like a chick. The group looked at each other but did not say anything. "Qilins are auspicious beasts. It seems like we are going to be lucky today," Zhou Xuanji said expectantly. Zhou Xuanji said expectantly. He would be 21 years old today. He hoped to get a mighty legendary sword. Ordinary or iron, bronze, silver, gold, amethyst, glorious gold, heavenly soul, intimidating spirit. It should be a legendary sword that surpassed glorious gold, right? After that, the group dispersed. Time passed quickly. A few hours passed. Zhou Xuanji came to the lakeside and was about to sit down when the sword spirit's voice resounded in his mind. "Analyze that the sword owner has reached 21 years old. Gotcha started." Ding. Congratulations. The sword owner obtained Heavenly Soul. M. Chapter 188. Ding. Congratulations. The sword owner obtained Heavenly Soul Sky Extinguishing Sword. Gold, Truth Sword. Heavenly Soul. Heavenly Soul. Heavenly Soul. Important things must be shouted 3 times in one's heart. Zhou Xuanji trembled in excitement. The glorious gold legendary sword was already very powerful. How powerful would the Heavenly Soul legendary sword be? When he broke through to astral projection, he was confident that he could defeat everyone at spirit refinement and great realization with the amethyst and glorious gold legendary swords. If he had the Heavenly Soul legendary sword, how powerful would he be? Supercilious. Only this word could describe the swelling in his heart. Next, the information of the 2 legendary swords appeared before his eyes. Sword name, Sky Extinguishing Sword Grade. Heavenly Soul description. A legendary sword born at the beginning of the world. It contains the power to destroy the world. Only astral projection cultivators can use it. Sword name, Truth Sword Grade. Gold description. Those who are pierced by this sword must speak the truth. Only astral projection cultivators can use it? Zhou Xuanji raised his brow. Can this be a problem for me? As for the Truth Sword, although it had some special abilities, it was no longer a threat to him. Where's the Sky Extinguishing Sword? Let me see it. Zhou Xuanji asked in his heart. He could not wait to see how amazing the Heavenly Soul legendary sword was. The sword owner must reach astral projection to see and use it. The sword spirit replied, but it did not extinguish the fire in his heart. In a good mood, he walked toward Jiang Shui. Jiang Shui was meditating, and he tickled her, which made her glare at him. He smiled proudly before turning to harass the others. A while later, Daoya old man stopped Zhou Xuanji, who was wandering around. Something bad has happened, he said seriously. Zhou Xuanji sat down in front of him and asked, what is it? The red Qilin jumped into his arms and rubbed against him intimately. When you were born, a Qilin appeared. Do you remember? Daoya old man asked with a frown. A murderous intent could be seen in his eyes. Zhou Xuanji stroked the red Qilin in his hand and asked, could this little guy be the son of that Qilin? That's right, Emperor Yan of Zhou killed that Qilin and extracted its Qilin tendon. Before that Qilin died, it sent this little fellow near us. It has already turned into dust and disappeared. Daoya old man's reply made Zhou Xuanji frown. Emperor Yan of Zhou's actions were too cruel. If this matter were to spread out, what would the world say? When you were born, that Qilin came to pray for you, and your fate is actually connected. Over these years, your luck has been so good, and you have escaped death many times. In actuality, the Qilin's prayer also helped you. The Qilin's death is equivalent to cutting off a portion of your fate. Emperor Yan of Zhou was most likely worried that you would suppress Zhou Yalong, so he bought time for him to grow. Daoya old man guessed, which made Zhou Xuanji frown even deeper. How vicious! Coincidentally, I am also preparing to barge into the great Zhou dynasty. Zhou Xuanji took a deep breath and said, I will remember this enmity. With that, he grabbed the red Kirin and left. Hey, don't go, let me play with it for a while. Daoya old man stretched out his hand and cried out, but Zhou Xuanji ignored him. And so, the red Qilin joined Zhou Xuanji's party. Qilins were auspicious beasts that represented good luck. At the same time, they were also very powerful. Legend said that a long time ago, before the human race was born, the Qilin race dominated the world. The red Qilin was about the same size as the three-eyed drought rodent. The two soon played together and rolled around on the snowy ground. Next, Zhou Xuanji continued to cultivate hard. 4 months later, Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 8. Now, he was so powerful that even Daoya old man was amazed. With the legendary sword made of flesh, his strength was terrifying, and the Tianxia map could provide him with endless spirit energy. Daoya old man often sighed in amazement. In less than 100 years, this brat would be able to enter the northern wilderness top 100. By then, he would be able to face Lin Guanyu and Huang Hantian head-on. Zhou Xuanji was also looking forward to meeting those two. He wanted to avenge his humiliation. Bei Xiao Wangjian also broke through to Soul Fountain. Jiang Shui was 10 days later than him, while Huang Lianxin was still working on her breakthrough. Xiao Jinghong and Han Shenbo were already at Astral Infant Level 10, while Zhao Tsongjian was at Level 5. The others had their own improvements, but none of them had broken through to the next stage. All of you are extraordinary, but compared to Zhou Xuanji, you are all mediocre. Daoya old man sat on a huge rock by the lake and said with a chuckle. Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and Zhao Tsongjian were all talented enough to join the sanctum. Han Shenbo was even a disciple of the sanctum. Although Huang Lianxin's talent in cultivation was not top-notch, she had the Ghost Emperor Divine Eye, which was really powerful. When she reached great accomplishment in her cultivation, she would surely be someone who would shake the world. Ah, big and small air were dragon eagles, mounts that countless people desired. The three-eyed drought rodent recognized all the treasures in the world. Chongming Demon Monarch was a 7th-rank demon. Among the demons, there were not many who could cultivate to such a stage. Only Bei Xiao Wangjian and the little black snake had mediocre talents. So, the two of them disliked each other and did not want to bear the title of the weakest. During their cultivation, some people passed by occasionally, but they did not cause any conflict. Zhou Xuanji and the rest were scattered when they cultivated. The two dragon eagles flew around, so their identities were not exposed. But the good times did not last long. 3 months later, a group of carriages barged into the place where Zhou Xuanji and the rest were cultivating. The leader was a muscular man who wore heavy black armor. His skin was dark and he did not wear a helmet. His black hair was loose, and he rode on a giant tiger that was also black. The tiger's eyes were filled with a murderous aura. Behind him were 15 soldiers riding on demonic beasts, escorting 4 carriages. "May I ask who is Sword God Zhou?" the man in black armor asked. With this, Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, Han Shenhua, and Chongming Demon Monarch looked at them warily. Sensing their gazes, the man in black armor frowned slightly and said, "We are the emissaries of the Songhai Ziggurat, Lu Longlin. We represent the Songhai Ziggurat to visit Sword God Zhou. Behind this is a generous gift. I hope Sword God Zhou will not blame us." Songhai Ziggurat, one of the northern wilderness region's 8 sanctums. It was also the largest intelligence-gathering faction. The Northern Wilderness Top 100 was created by them. Great Zhou's hero ranking was based on them, but it was not rigorous enough. "I wonder why Emissary General Lu is looking for our sword god?" Daoya Old Man asked with a relaxed expression. The Songhai Ziggurat rarely fought with the secular world. They were probably here to gather information. It's like this. Recently, our Songhai Ziggurat wants to create a Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. Everyone says that Sword God Zhou is an old monster, but according to our observations, Sword God Zhou's body has been growing, so we want to test his bone age. If he meets the requirements, he will enter the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. Lu Longlin replied as he looked at everyone and quickly locked onto Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji was still cultivating by the lake. The vortex of spiritual qi above his head was visible to the naked eye, which made his expression change slightly. "This is a good thing. Xuanji, come here quickly." Daoya Old Man waved at Zhou Xuanji. Having heard him, Zhou Xuanji got up and came to his side with the 8-step sword lunge. Such exquisite footwork. Lu Longlin felt quite startled. He had not been able to see Zhou Xuanji's movements clearly. "You haven't used your full strength, have you?" Lu Longlin said with a look of admiration on his face. Zhou Xuanji could not deny it. After that, Lu Longlin began to recuperate. The others came over and asked Zhou Xuanji how much of his strength he had used. After all, he had only used 2 divine swords. Zhou Xuanji did not reply but smiled. Daoya Old Man sighed. "It seems that even I am not your opponent now." How many years had he been with Zhou Xuanji? This child's growth rate was truly terrifying. However, he was most curious about the sword in Zhou Xuanji's hand. For cultivators, wealth, companions, techniques, and land were all part of one's strength. After the time it takes to burn half an incense stick, Lu Longlin got up and took out a jade slip. He walked over to Zhou Xuanji and asked, "Do you have anything to introduce yourself? I can write it down." Zhou Xuanji said, "My real name is Zhou Xuanji, and my mother is Lady Zhao Xian of Great Zhou." Today, it was time for him to correct Lady Zhao Xian's name. He did not know if Lady Zhao Xian's paternal family had really rebelled, but he was Lady Zhao Xian's son. From today onwards, he would travel under the name of Zhou Xuanji. Lu Longlin felt quite startled and a strange look appeared on his face. No wonder this boy wanted to kill the Empress of Great Zhou. Back then, news of the Empress of Great Zhou chasing after Lady Zhao Xian had long since spread, but Emperor Yan of Zhou had turned a blind eye. It was just like when the Empress of Great Zhou had been killed. He had only issued a warrant and had not personally acted. This was the Emperor. It looked like it was just the enmity between the 2 goddesses, but in actuality, Emperor Yan of Zhou had already cleaned up the Emperor's side for the next emperor. First on the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking, Zhou Xuanji, known as Sword God Zhou. "His talent is unparalleled," Lu Longlin said with a slight smile. Even though he had not received any information on the other emissaries, he believed that Zhou Xuanji was definitely first. His talent was unparalleled, and it was far more powerful than the second-ranked. Following this, he exchanged some pleasantries with Zhou Xuanji before leaving. "Go and check what's in the carriages." Zhou Xuanji got up and said as he patted his bottom. Everyone went to the 4 carriages. Daoya Old Man stood beside Zhou Xuanji and stroked his long beard as he sighed and said, "With a son like you, Lady Zhao Xian can rest at ease in the netherworld." Zhou Xuanji nodded. "In a few years, I should also find a way to ascend. Otherwise, when my time is up, I'll have to go down to accompany your mother," Daoya Old Man said as he shook his head and smiled. Unlike Chief Monk Xuanhe, his cultivation had not been able to break through to the great realization stage. If this went on, his lifespan would run out and he would die. Before, he had been prepared to die, but after seeing Zhou Xuanji, he did not want to die. He suddenly felt great anticipation. He wanted to see Zhou Xuanji's majestic bearing. "Don't worry, I won't let you die," Zhou Xuanji said as he patted his shoulder and smiled. Zhou Xuanji patted his shoulder and smiled. Although he was always arguing with Daoyo old man, he had long regarded this old man as his family. The two of them looked at each other and smiled before walking towards the carriages. The 4 carriages were filled with all sorts of treasures, jewelry, and even some spell scrolls and enchanted artifacts. All in all, they were quite sincere. Songhai Ziggurat could become the most powerful intelligence organization because they were generous in their spending. With these treasures, their cultivation speed would increase again. After this, the group returned to their boring life of cultivation. More than a month later, Zhou Xuanji broke through to Astral Infant Level 9. Han Shenhua exclaimed in amazement. At this rate, Zhou Xuanji would break through to astral projection before him. 4 months later, Zhou Xuanji celebrated his 22nd birthday. He forcefully broke through to Astral Infant Level 10 and began to break through to astral projection. Analyze that the sword owner has reached 22 years old. Gotcha started. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner obtained Glorious Gold, Holy Light Redemption Sword, Silver, Snakeskin Sword, 10,000 Ultimate Steps. Glorious Gold Legendary Sword. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes and felt elated. My luck has been pretty good recently. Could it be because of the red Qilin? An auspicious beast is a bull. Next, the information of the 2 legendary swords appeared before his eyes. Sword name, Holy Light Redemption Sword grade. Glorious Gold description. This sword has the ability to absorb the enemy's life force. It can also revive the dead and regenerate broken bones. Sword name, Snakeskin Sword grade. Silver description. Forged from the skin of countless strange snakes. If it flies, its flight path will be unpredictable, making it difficult to track and attack. Revive the dead and regenerate broken bones. Zhou Xuanji's eyes brightened. This sword is great. Amazing. But the snakeskin sword's special function was snakeskin movement. Chapter 190. Zhou Xuanji took out the 2 legendary swords and examined them closely. The Holy Light Redemption Sword was a golden sword with a wide blade. The connection between the hilt and the blade was like a pair of wings, which made him wonder if it was really the Redemption Sword. It seemed to be very lethal. As for the snakeskin sword, the surface of the blade was covered in snakeskin patterns. The hilt was slightly slanted, like a small half of a black snake's body. He immediately stepped on the snakeskin sword and began to fly with the Holy Light Redemption Sword in his hand. The others noticed his movements. Those 2 swords seemed to be new? Han Shenhua asked curiously. The Holy Light Redemption Sword was obviously not an ordinary sword. Xiao Jinghong nodded and smiled. Today, Master will be 22 years old. Every time it was Zhou Xuanji's birthday, he would have a few more swords. Everyone had long since understood the pattern. Zhou Xuanji flew quickly in the air. Sometimes he spiraled, and sometimes he landed at a slanted angle. His flight path was ever-changing, and the onlookers were dazzled. Could it be that he is practicing some kind of sword technique? The little black snake blinked its eyes and asked in confusion. No one answered it, because no one else knew. After a while, Zhou Xuanji landed and put away the Holy Light Redemption Sword and Snakeskin Sword. What is 10,000 ultimate steps? He asked in his heart. Could it be a kind of footwork? Then, an unfamiliar memory drilled into his mind. As it turned out, the 10,000 everlasting steps was a type of movement sword technique. It was similar to the 8-step sword lunge, but it was not a pure movement technique. Instead, it was an offensive sword technique. Within 1,000 feet, he could kill the enemy with a single step. It was even faster than the ranged sword propelling. Most importantly, it was very difficult for the enemy to dodge. The ranged sword propelling was actually very easy to dodge, so Zhou Xuanji rarely used it. He immediately took out the dog-culling sword and began to practice the 10,000 ultimate steps. He was practicing his swordsmanship by the lake. Seeing him practicing, Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Tsongjian, Beishao Wangjian and Huang Lianxin immediately surrounded him. Another new sword technique. I wonder what kind of powerful sword technique it is. Zhao Zongjian mumbled to himself, his eyes burning. Xiao Jinghong stretched out his hand and covered his eyes. It's better if you don't look. No. I want to see it. Zhao Zongjian slapped his hand away and said excitedly. The 10,000 everlasting steps had a total of 180 sword moves, and it could cover a distance of 300 meters. If one's cultivation level was high enough, it wouldn't even be a dream for them to cross 1,000 miles and slay their enemies. With Zhou Xuanji's current strength, practicing the first round of 10,000 ultimate steps took him 15 breaths of time. His movements were smooth, as if he had practiced for a long time. As always, after practicing it 100 times, he had achieved minor success in 10,000 everlasting steps. After 200 repetitions, 10,000 everlasting steps reached the major stage. After 300 repetitions, the 10,000 everlasting steps had formed its sword intent. The sword will of 10,000 ultimate steps was incredibly sharp. Once he entered the sword will mode, Zhou Xuanji's expression became cold. He raised his sword and slashed at a tree 100 meters away. In that instant, Xiao Jinghong and the other three could only sense that Zhou Xuanji had turned into a series of afterimages, and he was so fast that he could not be seen with the naked eye. There was a loud bang. The tree's trunk shattered, and countless branches and leaves scattered. Zhou Xuanji appeared behind the tree. He held the dog-culling sword in his hand, and his robes fluttered in the wind. From behind, he looked so handsome and domineering. Xiao Jinghong and the other three immediately surrounded him and asked him questions. 10,000 everlasting steps. At small accomplishment, you can kill from 100 meters away. At great accomplishment, you can kill from 1,000 miles away. Zhou Xuanji replied calmly. His tone was very cool, which made the four even more excited. You guys should first master the sword techniques that you have. Zhou Xuanji snorted. After that, he turned around and left. Xiao Jinghong and the other three were not discouraged. Instead, they were even more motivated. 3 months later, Han Shenbo returned from his scouting trip. He held a blue-covered book in his hand. His expression was one of excitement as he gathered everyone together. What made you lose your composure like this? Chongming Demon Monarch cried out. Recently, under Daoya Old Man's guidance, his cultivation had improved. He felt that he had a chance to break through to the 8th rank, so he was in a good mood. Han Shenbo coughed lightly and opened the blue-covered book. The first batch of the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking has been released. It has spread to all major factions and empires, he said. The top genius of the Northern Wilderness, Zhou Xuanji, the son of Great Zhou's Lady Zhao Xian. He is known as Sword God Zhou. He reached Astral Infant Level 8 at the age of 21, and he can defeat anyone in the Spirit Refinement stage. The Songhai Ziggurat nominated him as the unparalleled way of the sword in the Northern Wilderness. His spirit is not inferior to the ancient Sword Emperor. Everyone heard him and became excited. The unparalleled way of the sword in the Northern Wilderness. His spirit is not inferior to the ancient Sword Emperor. Well said. Xiao Jinghong clapped his hands and praised. This time, the Songhai Ziggurat nominated him personally. This sentence would surely spread across the world. Zhou Xuanji looked calm, but he was proud in his heart. Not bad. Han Shenbo continued to read. The first page of the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking recorded Zhou Xuanji's achievements since his birth. He fought the Sword Monarch of Great Zhou and killed the Empress of Great Zhou. Great Shang's prowess shook the world with the sun, moon, and stars. Xian Xianghua, Huang Hantian, Xinhao Sect, Haoqi Alliance, and many other famous people were mentioned. Just when everyone was excited, the world was shocked. Sword God Zhou was only 21 years old? A 21-year-old astral infant level 8. Was there any justice in this world? In an instant, the entire Northern Wilderness region was shaken. Even the sanctums were discussing Zhou Xuanji. This time, Zhou Xuanji's name was remembered by countless people. After the news spread to Great Zhou, it caused a huge commotion. What? Sword God Zhou is the Prince of Great Zhou. Ha ha ha, our Great Zhou is blessed with great people indeed. No wonder the Empress of Great Zhou would assassinate Sword God Zhou for no reason. So that's why. Her son should be like sword god Zhou. I suggest Zhou Xuanji to be the crown prince of Great Zhou. Zhou Yalong could not even enter the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. Although it was because of his age, what was his cultivation when he was 20 years old? Zhou Xuanji could kill him with one finger. Within Great Zhou's territory, all kingdoms and cities had such discussions. The one who was most affected was Zhou Yalong. The Empress of Great Zhou was so vicious. How good could her son be? Although Zhou Yalong had a good reputation, he was not as benevolent as Zhou Xuanji. On the other side, in the Great Zhou royal palace, Emperor Yan of Zhou sat on his throne and listened to the soldiers reading in the palace. Songhai Ziggurat called him unparalleled sword's way in the northern wilderness, not inferior to the ancient sword emperor. The soldier read carefully. After he finished, he looked up at Emperor Yan of Zhou carefully. The civil and military officials in the 2 rows were all shocked. Zhou Yalong's face was ugly. His eyes were burning with hatred. Zhou Qingxin's expression was complicated, while the princes were tongue-tied. Sword god Zhou was their brother. Okay, you can leave first. Shitan Chongsher stood up and waved his hand. The soldier felt relieved and left the palace immediately. Emperor Yan of Zhou laughed suddenly. Well said. It is Great Zhou's honor for my son to become the top genius in the northern wilderness. Zhou Yalong heard this and his eyes almost spewed fire. He clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his flesh and bled, but he did not let go. The hatred of killing his mother was irreconcilable. When Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended, he would use all the power of the entire empire to kill Zhou Xuanji. Humph, I'm afraid he's an unfilial son. At this moment, an unpleasant voice came from outside the palace. Lin Guanyu walked in with an indifferent expression, ignoring the shock of all the civil and military officials. Chapter 191. Facing Lin Guanyu's rude words, Emperor Yan of Zhou was expressionless. He had never been on good terms with this brother-in-law of his. It was because of Lin Guanyu and the merciful Melody Cliff that the Empress of the Great Zhou was so arrogant and domineering that she disturbed his harem. I wonder what brings Brother Lin to the Great Zhou dynasty? Emperor Yan of Zhou asked indifferently. This fellow had barged into the Great Zhou imperial palace. He did not take him seriously at all. If not for the fact that he was about to ascend, he would have abolished Lin Guanyu. On the day of ascension, Zhou Xuanji will surely come. At that time, I will kill him in Great Zhou. Lin Guanyu said indifferently, completely unafraid of offending Emperor Yan of Zhou. As soon as these words came out, the civil and military officials were in an uproar. Zhou Xuanji was coming? Shitan Chongsha frowned and asked, why is he here? Lin Guanyu pointed at Zhou Yalong and said, Zhou Xuanji had a maidservant by his side. That maidservant's clansmen were all slaughtered by the Yalong. Out of the hundreds of thousands of people in the city, only that one was left alive. Hearing this, everyone's expressions fell, including Emperor Yan of Zhou's. Zhou Yalong widened his eyes and quickly explained, I killed the Ghost Emperor tribe. They are the descendants of Xin Hao's Pontiff Ming. Other than that, I have never massacred a city. Even so, everyone still looked at him strangely. Massacring the entire city was truly insane. If such a person became the son of heaven in the future, what kind of atrocious things would he do? But right now, other than Zhou Yalong, no one else could assume the position of the son of heaven. Then you can stay in the Zhou dynasty for now. He did not look at Zhou Yalong and instead stared at Lin Guanyu. Lin Guanyu nodded slightly and also looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou with killing intent in his eyes. By the lake. Spit fire. Zhou Xuanji folded his arms in front of his chest and instructed. As soon as he finished speaking, the red qilin on his shoulder stretched its head forward and burped. A wisp of charred smoke seeped out from its mouth. Zhou Xuanji looked at him in disdain and asked, Why are you so weak? The red qilin felt aggrieved and buried its head under its claws. Daoya old man shouted from afar. It was just born not long ago. Don't force it. Did anyone force you when you were young? Zhou Xuanji glanced at him and said, I killed an evil cultivator at Inner Pellet when I was 2 years old. What do you think? Daoya old man was stunned, not knowing what to say. You're ruthless. Zhou Xuanji continued to train the red qilin. He only stopped after training it for an hour. The little fellow ran towards the three-eyed drought rodent with a wronged expression. He shook his head with a smile and looked at the horizon. His thoughts had already drifted to the great show. After thinking for a while, he continued to cultivate. In the blink of an eye. A month later, Xueqi began breaking through to astral projection. Everyone gathered around and waited expectantly. Once Master achieves a breakthrough to leaving Aperture Realm, it'll be the time for you to stand at the top of the world. Xiao Jinghong said with a face full of admiration. If he encountered Xinhao sect and Haoqi alliance in the future, he would not have to worry. The others nodded in agreement. Daoya Old Man stroked his beard and smiled. When he breaks through to the God Ascension level, he might be able to enter the top 50 of the Northern Wilderness top 100. Once he breaks through to the Mahayana level, he will be able to compete for the top spot in the world. As he said this, he sighed in his heart. Even though they saw this freak every day, when they thought about his talent and strength, they couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Xueqi sat by the lake as spiritual qi surged into his body. At this moment, he was using his inner vision. The leaving Aperture Realm was the realm where one's primordial spirit could leave one's body after clearing all 9 apertures in one's body. If the primordial spirit could leave the body, it would be able to absorb spiritual qi and grow stronger. Now, he had already opened up the apertures in his arms. The 9 apertures in the human body were located in the limbs, head, abdomen, chest, and back. There were 2 apertures on the back, but they were not as difficult to open up as the aperture in the heart. Xueqi had already mastered the flesh sword, so it was not difficult for him to open up all 9 apertures. He opened up an aperture every half an hour, which made Daoya Old Man's face twitch. I'm not watching anymore. This is too depressing. Daoya Old Man turned around and left, waving his hand. The others watched with great interest to prepare for breaking through to astral projection in the future. I feel like astral projection is not that difficult. Jiang Shui mumbled. The others had the same thought. Chongming Demon Monarch covered his forehead and said, "That's just him. I've seen many cultivators die from blood spurting out from their bodies when they broke through to astral projection." Astral projection was a major obstacle on the path of cultivation. Regardless of whether it was humans or demons, the death rate before this stage was extremely high. Xueqi had the protection of the Tianxia map and a powerful physique, so his life was not in danger. Time continued to pass. A long while later, suddenly, Xueqi opened up the last aperture. Next, his body trembled, and he felt that he was flying. He looked down and realized that his body was still on the ground. Everyone was looking at his body anxiously. This is the out-of-body experience? Xueqi was amazed. He felt that he was as light as a feather and was not affected by gravity. He looked over and actually saw some lonely souls and wild ghosts. Some were at the bottom of the lake, some were floating above the forest, and some were hiding in the bushes in the forest. Damn, why are there so many ghosts around? Seeing ghosts in broad daylight? Aren't they afraid of light? Xueqi cursed. No wonder he always felt chilly winds blowing at his back when he was sleeping. Shortly after, he collected his thoughts and traveled around the world. After his soul left his body, his speed became even faster. After he leaped over mountains and lakes, Xueqi was in a good mood. The feeling of traveling with his soul was so good that he could not help but sigh in amazement. I'm a mayfly in the world, a grain in the vast ocean. I mourn for the fleeting moment of my life, and I envy the boundless river. I carry a flying immortal to travel, and I embrace the bright moon to die. On the other side, Jiang Shui saw that Xueqi was not moving and asked anxiously, "What's wrong with him?" His soul left his body. "Don't worry. He will be fine." Chongming Demon Monarch explained in amazement. This guy's breakthrough is as easy as drinking water. A while later, Xueqi's astral spirit entered his body. Next, his spirit energy began to grow tremendously. Analyze that the sword owner has reached astral projection. Gotcha started. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner obtained Silver, Book Cutter Sword, Amethyst, Frost King Icebound Sword, Rui Purple Cloud Robe. Xueqi opened his eyes with an odd expression. Book Cutter Sword again? Wasn't it broken? And how did its grade increase? Some swords are not unique. The sword spirit explained, which made Xueqi feel that it was forced. But it was not bad to obtain another amethyst legendary sword. Most importantly, he could finally use the Heavenly Soul legendary sword. The information of the two legendary swords appeared before his eyes, but he ignored the book-cutter sword. Sword name, Frost King Icebound Sword Grade. Amethyst description. Made with 10,000-year-old ice flame. Contains boundless ice elemental energy. It can absorb the ice and snow in the world and freeze an area of 100 miles with one slash. Xueqi smiled satisfactorily and began regulating his chi flow. The others came up to him and surrounded him, asking him questions all at once. A while later, Xueqi got up slowly. After breaking through to astral projection, he felt that his spirit energy grew tremendously. His overall power was more than 5 times stronger than before. Chapter 192. Xueqi took out the Frost King sword first. Seeing that he took out a new legendary sword, everyone was curious. The Frost King sword was a meter long, and its blade was 4 fingers wide. It looked like it was made of crystal, and the moment he took it out, everyone felt a wave of chilliness wash over them. Such a handsome sword. Bei Xiao Wangjian praised. His eyes were filled with envy. Xueqi smiled proudly and slashed toward the surface of the lake. In an instant, the surface of the lake froze at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone was dumbfounded. After that, he put away the Frost King's sword. After that, he took out the Sky Extinguishing sword. With this sword, everyone, including Xueqi, felt a chill down their spines. The Sky Extinguishing sword's blade was blackish-red in color, as if magma was hidden within the blade. The sword guard was like the head of a demon king from hell, with 2 horns growing out of it. The sword hilt was like a burnt bone. The entire sword looked like a demonic sword. The blade was a meter long, and it was as wide as the Frost King's sword. Holding the sword, Xueqi squinted his eyes. So powerful. Just by holding it, he felt invincible. It was as though he could destroy the world with a single slash. He immediately put away the sword because the others were already trembling and were covered in cold sweat. What sword is that? Why do I feel fear when I see it? Zhao Zongjian asked in confusion. His eyes were filled with worry. Would such a demonic sword cause Xueqi's cultivation to go berserk? Jiang Shui also looked at Xueqi anxiously. Seeing this, he smiled and said, "This is the Sky Extinguishing sword. Only astral projection cultivators can use it. Don't worry, my sword will not harm me." The Supreme Legendary Sword System's products were all top-notch. There was no such thing as losing control. In half a year, Emperor Yan of Zhou would ascend. Xueqi was looking forward to that day. After that, he gathered everyone together to discuss about charging into Great Zhou. Everyone in the team was powerful. Other than the 3-eyed drought rodent and the red qilin, the weakest was at the peak of Inner Pellet. In a kingdom, they could be the most powerful cultivators of a kingdom. Xueqi needed their help. Using a legendary sword consumed too much energy after all. After he finished fighting, he needed his teammates to help him escape. Daoya Old Man was not only powerful, but he could also tell fortunes. Chongming Demon Monarch could defend against an army of 10,000. The 2 Dragon Eagles could be used as fighter jets. Huang Lianxin had the Ghost Emperor Divine Eye and could see through everything, including arrays. Jiang Shui was a sorcerer and healer. Bei Xiao Wangjian, Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Zongjian, and Han Shenbo could all be fighting forces. For now, he was very satisfied with this team. When they began to discuss the matter of killing Zhou Yalong, the entire world gathered in the Great Zhou dynasty. Emperor Yan of Zhou was in the northern wilderness top 100, and he was about to ascend, so he invited all the powerful figures in the world to come and watch. The Hanin divine sect had already brought many of their elders with them, and the Great Qin Empire had done the same. After Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended, although the Great Zhou Empire's power was greatly reduced, he still went to the upper realm. If they destroyed Great Zhou and met Emperor Yan of Zhou after ascending, how awkward would that be? The cultivation resources in the upper realm were definitely higher than those in the mortal realm. No one could predict how powerful Emperor Yan of Zhou would become. In a mansion in the Great Zhou Imperial City, Su Xianxian, who was wearing a veil, sat in front of the stone table, her eyes empty. An old woman stood beside her with an angry expression and berated, "Do you know what you're doing? Disfiguring your face and rejecting the marriage? Let me tell you, even if your face is disfigured, you still have to marry Zhou Yalong. However, with your face gone, will Zhou Yalong treat you well in the future? You're hopelessly stupid. You're just forcing yourself onto the path of death. This old woman was an elder of the Hanyin divine sect, and she was called Zhang Lanya. She had raised Su Xianxian, and she was so angry that her body trembled. In order to reject the marriage, Su Xianxian had disfigure her face. This caused the higher-ups of the Hanyin divine sect to be furious, and they did not even dare to tell Great Zhou about this. Now, they were thinking of ways to help her recover her face. No matter where, a woman's face was very important. This was especially so in the cultivation world. Unless one could shake the world like Xian Xianghua, one could only rely on their face. Su Xianxian remained silent and did not say a word. At this moment, she wished that someone would come and save her. She had completely given up on the Hanyin divine sect and felt that it was a den of demons. That's right. Is Zhou Xuanji coming? Su Xianxian suddenly asked. Now, everyone knew that sword god Zhou's name was Zhou Xuanji. She already knew about Zhou Xuanji's past. He was also a prince of Great Zhou. He had an irreconcilable feud with Zhou Yalong. Along the way, she heard many rumors that sword god Zhou would come to stop Zhou Yalong's coronation. Humph, Lin Guanyu is here. Unless he wants to die, he will not dare to come. It's good that he's here. This way, your future husband's position as the emperor will be stable. Zhang Lanya snorted coldly as she thought about how to convince Su Xianxian. Having heard that, Su Xianxian did not speak anymore. Her thoughts had already drifted away. 4 months later, Zhou Xuanji broke through to astral projection level 2. He wore an exquisite purple robe and looked handsome and noble. It was the Rui purple cloud robe. The defense of this robe was much higher than the white dragon golden robe. Even the silver-grade legendary sword could not pierce through it. After wearing it, it was as light as if he was not wearing it at all. The group began packing their things and prepared to leave for Great Zhou. Daoya old man walked up to him and chuckled as he asked, Lin Guanyu has arrived in Great Zhou. Are you sure you want to go? Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, It's good that he's here. He was already confident that he could defeat Huang Hantian. Although Huang Hantian was not at the Great Realization stage, he could stand against Lin Guanyu. This meant that Lin Guanyu was only at a low level in the Great Realization stage. Great Zhou would be the place where Lin Guanyu would fall. Actually, he did not hate Lin Guanyu. Instead, he admired Lin Guanyu. There were not many people in the world who were so determined to take revenge for his sister. But this was the world. If Lin Guanyu wanted to kill him, then he had to kill Lin Guanyu. The strong preyed on the weak. This was the law of the jungle. If you can defeat Lin Guanyu, won't you be able to enter the Northern Wilderness Top 100 directly? Daoya old man rubbed his chin and said in a mocking tone. But he did not think that it was possible. Lin Guanyu was the Baba Blade Master. It was already good enough to fight to a draw. Zhou Xuanji smiled and did not speak further. After a while, the group packed up and began their journey. Zhou Xuanji looked at Chongming Demon Monarch and said, Are you ready? Chongming Demon Monarch was a little stunned and asked, Ready for what? Pft. Jiang Shui covered her mouth and giggled. The others laughed too. The little black snake who was coiled around Small Air's neck said, Of course, to be a tank. When we reach Great Zhou, you will have to defend against Great Zhou's army. What the, are you serious? Chongming Demon Monarch trembled and asked anxiously. Although he had thick skin and flesh, how could he defend against an empire alone? The red Qilin, which was already as big as a dog, bared its teeth at him, as though it was encouraging him. Will it be a sneak attack, or will it be a thunderbolt from the clear sky? Han Shenhua asked as he rubbed his hands. He looked excited. Once they succeeded, they would all be famous across the world. Zhou Xuanji would no longer be the only one in the limelight. Chapter 193. On the mountain path, Zhou Xuanji strolled ahead with a fruit in his hand. Jiang Shui walked beside him. Chongming Demon Monarch walked in front, while Han Shenhua and the little black snake followed behind. Daoya Old Man walked to the side, while the others trained with their swords. A big and small heir circled in the air to scout for them. Zhou Xuanji looked at the two of them and asked curiously, Why can't they speak? The two dragon eagles were already at the 4th rank. If it were any other demon, they could transform into human form. Maybe they are born handicapped? Jiang Shui guessed as she looked at Zhou Xuanji. The expression in her eyes made him confused. What's wrong? He touched his face and asked. Nothing. I just felt a faint strand of violet qi between your brows. Jiang Shui shook her head. She rubbed her eyes and looked at him seriously. It's gone now. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. Zhou Xuanji smiled proudly. Maybe my monarchical violet qi intimidated you. Jiang Shui rolled her eyes and said, You? Only you can't intimidate me in the whole world. You are the one I'm least afraid of. Not bad, not bad. From now on, you will be in charge of my wives and concubines. You want to have a group of wives and concubines? Can't I? No. Can I take a few less? How many? 8. Are you itching for a beating? The two began to bicker, which livened up the atmosphere. With their speed, it would take them at least a month to reach the royal city of Great Zhou. They were not in a hurry. It was best to arrive on the day of the coronation. Only then would it be interesting. The main character always arrived at the most crucial moment. Along the way, the group chatted about the past and the present, enjoying the scenery. At the same time, all the checkpoints around Great Zhou were filled with people. Many cultivators from other empires or factions came to join in the fun. Especially the royal city of Great Zhou. It was extremely noisy. In the royal palace, Great Shang's state advisor Yang Zhongtian looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou with a smile. The generals on both sides looked alert. It's time for Great Zhou and Great Shang to bury the hatchet. Emperor Yan of Zhou said slowly. He stared at Yang Zhongtian and sighed in amazement. Back then, I had yet to ascend to the throne, and Yang Xindi was still young. The few of us traveled around the world together. How carefree it was. Unfortunately, things remain the same, but people have changed. Listening to his words, Yang Zhongtian and Shitan Changshe revealed looks of nostalgia. Their time had passed. Yang Zhongtian sternly said, Our emperor also has the same intention. Great Zhou has left you. Great Shang has left Haoqi Alliance. If the two empires can join hands and support each other, it will definitely be a win-win situation. Emperor Yan of Zhou nodded and started to chat with Yang Zhongtian about the past. The two of them did not even mention the Hanin divine sect. It seemed harmonious, but there was actually an undercurrent surging. If it wasn't for the fact that the Hanin divine sect had a marriage alliance with Great Zhou, Great Shang probably wouldn't have lowered their heads and come here. Right, have Zhong Kueiming come in. Emperor Yan of Zhou suddenly ordered. Hearing this, a general immediately left. Yang Zhongtian's expression changed as he asked, Why is he in the Zhou dynasty? Most of the civil and military officials in the hall were in an uproar. Even Zhou Yalong looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou in surprise. He owes me his life. Emperor Yan of Zhou replied calmly, a slight smile on his lips. If one did not look closely, it would be difficult to notice. Yang Zhongtian's expression flickered as he fell silent. Soon, Zhong Kueiming entered the hall. Ha ha ha, Emperor Yan of Zhou, your Zhou dynasty is indeed prosperous. Great Zhou's women are also quite tasty. I like that whatever tower, oh drunken spring tower. A hearty laugh sounded out, followed by Zhong Kueiming. He was dressed in black clothes with red silk and had a green crown on his head. His face was not handsome, but he gave off a ferocious aura. This was especially so for the red tattoo on the right side of his face, which looked like a blood-red claw. Zhong Kueiming was one of the Northern Wilderness top 100, and his strength was not inferior to Lin Guanyu's. No one knew which sect he was from, but 1,000 years ago, he had appeared out of nowhere and saved the Hunyuan Empire. Huanyuan's emperor had personally received him, and his name had shaken the world ever since. This person's personality was domineering and his temper was quite explosive, but he had a benevolent and righteous heart, and he loved to help those in need. Zhong Kueiming glanced at Yang Zhongtian and smiled as he said, Ho, an old goat like you came as well. How is the Fury Buddha? The outcome of the last battle was not decided yet. Next time, I will personally pay him a visit. When Yang Zhongtian heard this, his face instantly turned ugly. Zhong Kueiming looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou and cursed, I met Lin Guanyu. That fellow still has a scowling face, And his little sister definitely has a scowling face as well. How did you endure it? Emperor Yen of Zhou gave a slight smile and said, I'll be counting on Brother Zong's help in ascending to the throne. No problem. No problem. Zong Kuei-ming waved his hand, and then he walked over to Zhou Yalong and clicked his tongue with admiration. You really resemble your imperial father. But why do you seem like a short-lived ghost? When Zhou Yalong heard that, his face instantly turned green. Emperor Yen of Zhou frowned and said, Brother Zong, don't tease a child. We will discuss the matter of the venue first. Zong Kuei-ming grinned when he heard this, and then he turned around and walked to the center of the hall. Don't worry. With me here, even Xian Xianghua can't leave, let alone Sword God Zhou. Zong Kuei-ming said conceitedly, causing Yun Zhongtian to shake his head. You can indeed deal with Sword God Zhou. But you want to deal with Xian Xianghua? He was probably courting death. A month later, Zhou Xuanji and the others came to the top of a mountain. Looking into the distance, they could see the high walls of Great Zhou's border pass at the end of the forest. Leave a big and small air nearby, or else we will be exposed too easily. The little black snake said. If the two dragon eagles had transformed, it would be fine. But they were so big that they were too eye-catching. The red qilin was already covered with black fur and looked like a black dog. Fortunately, its horns were not long and could be wrapped around its ears. Zhou Xuanji nodded and looked up at a big and small heir, who were circling above him. Hide yourselves and don't get caught by others, understand? He said. The two dragon eagles tilted their heads before flying deep into the forest. The group continued to fly toward the border pass. After flying past the forest, they saw many cultivators walking toward the border pass on the plain. Looking from above, they looked like a long line of ants. Soon, they landed and lined up to enter Great Zhou. Thousands of people lined up in front of them. It was a majestic and noisy scene. Why are there so many people? Won't the royal capital be even more crowded? Jiang Shui said in amazement. There were hundreds of such entrances, and there were already so many people today. It was hard to estimate how many people there were in the royal capital. A young master in front of them turned around and smiled as he waved his fan. Actually, most people are here to see Sword God Zhou. Ever since he was revealed to be the Prince of Great Zhou, countless rumors have been spreading. Everyone thinks that with Sword God Zhou's personality, he would not allow the son of the enemy who killed his mother to ascend to the throne. After that, a look of admiration appeared on his face. A muscular man in front of him turned around and grinned. Lin Guanyu, Emperor Yen of Zhou, Hanin Divine Sect, and so many powerful cultivators are guarding Great Zhou's royal capital. Do you think Sword God Zhou dares to come? Even if they were beaten to death, they would never have thought that Sword God Zhou would line up here like them. Chapter 194. No matter how many powerful enemies there are, Sword God Zhou still dares to charge in. Zhao Tsongjian scoffed and the young master in front of him nodded. Seeing that there were so many of them, the burly man didn't say anything. He just shook his head and laughed. In his eyes, Sword God Zhou was being praised too highly. Sooner or later, he would fall miserably. Jiang Shui curled her lips and said in a low voice, It seems like there are many people who look up to you. In the team of a few thousand people, what she heard the most was how powerful Sword God Zhou was. Zhou Xuanji chuckled at her, hiding his achievements and fame. In fact, he was also lamenting. Didn't I just do those things? Is it worth so many people singing praises? It was really strange. There were no phones or computers in the northern wilderness region, nor was there any internet. Why did it feel like news was more developed than on Earth? Whatever he did, news would spread quickly. It could only be said that people were afraid of fame as pigs were afraid of being fat. Time passed. Only after 2 hours did Zhou Xuanji and the others enter. They were all using pseudonyms. In any case, as long as they paid enough spirit stones, the border guards wouldn't stop them. This was also the unspoken rule of the dynasties. If the strong couldn't stop them, it wouldn't matter even if the weak blocked them. It was better to make more money. After entering, everyone walked slowly. After all, there was still some time before the day of ascension. There are so many people. Emperor Yen of Zhou really knows how to create momentum. Daoya old man clicked his tongue in wonder. Looking around, there were people everywhere, all rushing towards the great Zhou imperial city. Emperor Yan of Zhou had announced that he was going to ascend 3 years ago, and he had arranged a marriage with the Hanin divine sect. He had even announced Lin Guanyu's arrival, causing Great Zhou to become the most talked-about empire in the northern wilderness. It seemed ordinary, but in reality, there were many intentions behind it. Xiao Jinghong nodded and said, "I'm afraid he's trying to intimidate Master so that Master won't dare to come." Daoya old man smiled faintly and said, "That might not be the case." Xiao Jinghong asked curiously. However, the old man just smiled and shook his head, not saying anything. Zhou Xuanji, on the other hand, was very relaxed. After all, he had already experienced many fierce battles, and his mental fortitude was already extraordinary. The closer he got to Great Zhou's royal city, the more Zhou Xuanji thought back to the days when he was young in Great Zhou's royal palace. At that time, the ones who accompanied him the most were palace maids and nannies. He shook his head and smiled, no longer thinking about it. On the day that Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended, he would definitely flip the heavens and earth upside down. 3 days later, they stopped by the river to rest. Chongming Demon Monarch used the little black snake as a whip and whipped it on the ground. He called it tempering his body. "Old ox, didn't you eat?" The little black snake was still very strong-willed and clamored. When Chongming Demon Monarch heard this, he forcefully threw him onto the ground, causing the ground to crack. Afterward, the little black snake fainted and blood flowed out of its mouth as if it was dead. Zhou Xuanji stared at him and cursed, "Are you killing snakes?" Chongming Demon Monarch quickly put down the little black snake and said pitifully, "It's the one who asked me to use force." He was already gentle enough. Who told this fellow to court death? The others also surrounded him and added insult to injury. They reprimanded Chongming Demon Monarch, causing him to hate the little black snake even more. Daoya old man stood by the river, his right hand constantly calculating something. Strange, why is the fate of the great Zhou being blinded? Something is wrong, something is wrong. He muttered to himself, appearing very distressed. Just then, he noticed a figure walking out of the woods across the river. It was a monster. It had a tiger's body and a human's face. It was covered in white fur and looked like a child. It stared at Daoya old man and opened its mouth to say something. Daoya old man's expression changed drastically, and he frowned. "Chongming, catch it." At this moment, Zhou Xuanji's voice came from behind. Next, a black shadow flew past Chongming Demon Monarch's head and dashed toward the demon. The demon was so frightened that it turned around to flee. Unfortunately, Chongming Demon Monarch pressed its butt onto the ground and almost crushed it to death. "Trying to escape?" Chongming Demon Monarch laughed disdainfully as he spoke. Soon, he brought the demon to Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji asked Daoya old man, "What were you guys talking about?" Daoya old man turned around and said, "It told me that we are in great trouble." The group frowned. What did that mean? Daoya old man shrugged his shoulder and said, "It said that we captured a very important person and that we will be in great trouble sooner or later." "I don't know anything else." Zhou Xuanji turned to look at the tiger-bodied human-faced demon and asked, "Can you speak?" Although the demon was terrified, it acted as though it could not understand human language. Seeing this, he immediately took out the truth sword and stabbed it with his sword. "Tell me, who did we capture, and who is looking for trouble with us?" Facing his interrogation, the demon confessed straight away. "You captured the descendant of the Jiang clan. The great emperor will come for you. Now, all the demons inside and outside of Great Zhou are looking for you." The group heard him and looked at Jiang Shui instinctively with a strange expression. Jiang Shui was stunned too. She suspected that she had heard wrongly. Zhou Xuanji pointed at her and asked, "Is it her? The descendant of the Jiang clan, the great emperor? Could it be the third in the world, Jiang Wudi?" The demon looked at Jiang Shui instinctively and shook his head, saying, "Too young." The group could not help but think of Jiang Shui's grandmother, the crazy old woman. Daoya old man clicked his tongue in wonder and said, "Interesting, interesting. No wonder Great Zhou's destiny has been concealed recently. So it was Jiang Wudi's doing." Zhou Xuanji's expression was strange. What? He could already smell the scent of dog blood. Could it be that Jiang Wudi wanted to forcefully take Jiang Shui away and humiliate him by saying that he was not worthy of Jiang Shui? After that, The two of them would have to be separated for several years or even decades, and he would only be able to marry Jiang Shui when he reached the peak? There shouldn't be any problems with the engagement during this period, right? My grandma is still alive? Jiang Shui asked with a frown. She did not show any surprise. The demon looked at her and asked in surprise, "Your grandmother? Could it be that your grandmother is a descendant of the Jiang family? Quick, tell me where she is. We need to return your grandmother to the great emperor as soon as possible." Chongming demon monarch couldn't help but ask, "Isn't she a descendant of the Jiang clan? Do you really have to find an old lady?" The demon said disdainfully, "She won't be acknowledged by the Jiang clan. Back then that descendant of the Jiang clan was engaged to someone, but she ended up falling in love with a mortal and escaped from the Jiang clan, causing the Jiang clan to be humiliated. Now, she even has a granddaughter. The Jiang clan wants to capture her and bring her back to apologize. As for her granddaughter, the Jiang clan hasn't mentioned a word about it. Perhaps they don't even know about it." Zhou Xuanji frowned. The story was indeed melodramatic. But why was the plot not right? Jiang Shui's grandmother? Jiang Shui's expression was complicated. She didn't know what to say. "I advise you to release me. The great emperor will personally descend upon the great Zhou dynasty sooner or later. If you protect the descendant of the Jiang clan, you will all die." The monster saw the change in everyone's expression and thought that they were afraid, so he shouted. "You're very arrogant," Zhou Xuanji said with squinted eyes. He could sense Jiang Shui's dejection. The feeling of not being accepted by one's family was hard for anyone to accept. "What's wrong? I'm advising you out of goodwill. If you dare touch me, you'll be going against the great emperor. You'll die a horrible death." The demon snorted. Even though he was being stepped on, he was still arrogant. An hour later, everyone sat by the river. Chongming demon monarch held a roasted leg in his hand and smiled. "This guy's meat is quite fragrant." In front of them, there was a fire rack with a tiger's body on it. The smell of burnt meat filled the air. Chapter 195. The group began talking about Jiang Wudi as they ate the barbecued meat. Daoya old man spoke the most. He had lived for thousands of years and was the most experienced after all. The Jiang clan was one of the oldest clans in the human race, and Jiang Wudi was even more unfathomable. His highest ranking in the World Millennium Duel was second. Unfortunately at that time, he encountered Xian Xianghua at her peak, and was utterly defeated. Putting aside Xian Xianghua and Yang Di, who reigned supreme in the world, Jiang Wudi was as powerful as a god. The rise of each empire had the Jiang clan behind them. There were also disciples from the Jiang clan in the 8 sanctums. They had infiltrated every corner of the human race. "It's okay. He's looking for the crazy old woman anyway. We will leave after we finish this," Bei Xiao Wangjian said indifferently. Northern Sword Valiant said nonchalantly. They finally understood why the crazy old lady would abandon Jiang Shui. It was to protect her. But what about the fact that she owed him money? If she did not owe money, Jiang Shui and Zhou Xuanji would not be homeless. Zhou Xuanji looked at Jiang Shui, who was beside him. She hugged her knees and remained silent. He asked, "Do you want to look for your grandma? After this is over, I will bring you to her." Jiang Shui shook her head and said, "Forget it. Maybe I will become a burden to her if I look for her." If she was not a burden, why would she abandon her? There was another possibility, which was that her grandma was already dead. Regardless of the reason, she did not want to pursue it. That's right. Everyone has their own path. The conflict between your grandma and the Jiang clan should be settled during your parents' generation. You have your own life. Daoya old man said with a smile as he stroked his long beard. He paused for a moment before continuing with deep meaning. "Follow Xuanji and cultivate well. When he becomes the top cultivator in the world, you can support your grandma." Jiang Shui nodded and said excitedly, "I want to enter the Northern Wilderness Top 100 too. I want to be the second in the world and suppress Jiang Wudi." Zhou Xuanji smiled. "Okay. I will be the first in the world, and you will be the second." This girl had really grown up. Her heart was much stronger than he imagined. "If so, then I will be the third in the world and suppress Jiang Wudi," Xiao Jinghong said in high spirits. He believed that he could do it. The others laughed along. I will be the fourth in the world and become the sovereign of the demon race. Tui, I want to be the third. Then I won't fight with you. I'll just be the fifth in the world. Why? The fifth place is mine. Forget it. You won't be able to enter the Northern Wilderness top 100 in this lifetime. The red Qilin tilted its head as it looked at the group fooling around with each other. Its big watery eyes were filled with curiosity. Jiang Shui felt warmth in her heart. She knew that everyone was trying to liven up the atmosphere so that she wouldn't feel so sad. After everyone finished eating the tiger demon's meat, Xueqi clapped his hands, got up, and said, "Let's go. It's time to go." Jiang Wudi's target was not them. Their target was not Jiang Wudi. Emperor Yan of Zhou's ascension was their current goal. Under the blue sky of the great Zhou imperial city, a huge stone platform that was thousands of meters wide floated in the air above the imperial city. Soldiers flew up and down, setting up altars, flags, and banquets for the guests on the stone platform. This platform was called the Ascension Platform. Emperor Yan of Zhou would ascend here, and at the same time, Zhou Yalong would become the emperor here. The streets of the imperial city were packed with people, and all the inns in the city were full. Countless red lanterns were hung on the streets, and laughter could be heard everywhere. Among the sea of people, many children were playing and chasing each other. The child beggars under the trees by the streets were also talking about ascension and becoming the emperor. In a heavily guarded residence in a corner of the imperial city, Su Xianxian was wearing a bright red wedding dress. She looked at herself in the bronze mirror and was lost in thought. She was still wearing a veil. Previously, it was to reduce trouble, but now, it was to cover her ugliness. "My lady, the envoy from the Songhai Ziggurat is here too." At this moment, a lady walked in from the gate and said excitedly, "This time, you are going to marry the new emperor of Great Zhou. This will surely shake the northern wilderness region. All the people who came are influential people. The future emperor is better than the little evil lord no matter how you look at it. He's cultured, has powerful cultivation, and is well-read." The lady walked up to Su Xianxian and sighed in admiration. Her tone was filled with envy. "Are you going to marry him?" Su Xianxian asked. The lady heard her and blushed immediately. "I'm of humble birth, how can I marry?" she said shyly. Her heart was already in turmoil. If she were to be a dowry maid, could she become a noble or even a concubine? The more she thought about it, the more excited she became, as though she had found a direction in life. Su Xianxian sighed faintly and did not speak anymore. At the same time, Emperor Yan of Zhou and Great Zhou's officials and generals were approaching the Songhai Ziggurat's envoy, Lu Longlin. His Majesty, the Flame Emperor, is really powerful. Each of his sons is more powerful than the other. I tested Zhou Xuanji personally, and I was the one who passed his information to the ziggurat. Lu Longlin chuckled, which made Zhou Yalong, who was behind Emperor Yan of Zhou, change his expression slightly. The other officials looked at each other in dismay, knowing that they did not come with good intentions. Emperor Yan of Zhou laughed heartily and said, "Thank you, Brother Lu, for taking care of me. If Yalong breaks through to great realization in the future, please take care of the Northern Wilderness top 100. Even though Lu Longlin's cultivation was lower than his, he still had to call him brother. It was because he could not afford to offend the Songhai Ziggurat. "No problem, no problem." Lu Longlin waved his hand and smiled. Seeing Zhong Kuiming, he smiled and said, "Oh, Brother Zhong is here too." After that, he walked towards Zhong Kuiming. Emperor Yan of Zhou looked at an old official beside him and asked, "Are you ready?" The old official replied respectfully, "Everything is ready until the time comes." In 20 hours, the ascension ceremony would begin. Following this, Emperor Yan of Zhou told Zhou Yalong to make preparations. Before he ascended, he had to see Zhou Yalong get married and see his son ascend to the throne. Only then would he be at ease. Just like that, all of the officials started to get busy. Great Zhou's royal guards and soldiers landed on the walls of the royal city, waiting in formation. There were also many soldiers riding on flying wolves in the air above the royal city, patrolling. The sun set and the moon rose, and the sun rose in the east. The next morning, when the first rays of sunlight streaked across the Great Zhou royal city, figures walked through the air towards the ascension stage. There were guests from the Hanyin divine sect, Great Shang, Songhai Ziggurat, Great Chen, and other large factions. Yun Zhongtian and Great Chen's officials chatted as they looked outside the city, as if they were waiting for something. Soon, they were all seated. Looking down, there were 2,000 banquets on the ascension stage, and the higher one's status was, the closer they sat. There was a tall tower at the edge of the stone stage near the palace. Great Zhou's flag was at the top of the tower, fluttering in the wind. Looking down, everyone in the city had walked out of their houses and were on the streets or balconies, looking up at the ascension stage. Nearly 10 million people were looking up. This was an unprecedented event in Great Zhou's history. Shitan Chongsher leapt up and landed below the tall tower. He stabbed his long saber into the ground and stood there like a guardian deity, his face expressionless. Royal guards landed at the edge of the ascension stage, silently waiting for Emperor Yan of Zhou to descend. Chapter 196. Zhou Yalong, who was wearing a golden dragon robe, led a group of princes and princesses out of the palace. He wore a red embroidered ball on his chest. His face was calm, but his eyes could not hide the excitement in them. He was about to become the ruler of Great Zhou. Second brother, from now on, you are the son of heaven, Zhou Qingxin said enviously. As for the Great Zhou crown prince, he did not come. Back then, he had made a big fool of himself and guessed Zhou Xuanji's identity. But he had already disappeared from the world, and no one knew who did it. Emperor Yan of Zhou did not pursue this matter, but every time they thought about it, they would feel terrified. Please support me in the future. Zhou Yalong chuckled, but he didn't turn around to look at Zhou Qingxin. Seeing this, Princess Xuanya pouted and thought to herself, what are you pretending for? She hated Zhou Yalong's hypocrisy the most. He was clearly looking down on everyone, yet he was still pretending to be polite. Soon, the imperial family members were seated. At a glance, there were more than 10,000 people on the Ascension platform. There were more than 10 major factions, and there were even guests from holy lands and dynasties. Beside Princess Xuanya sat an exquisite young lady. She wore a blue dress and was also a princess. Her name was Princess Lingling, and she was Consort Chen's adopted daughter. After Lady Zhao Xian's incident, Emperor Yan of Zhou had betrothed her to Zhou Xuanji, which was equivalent to a ghost marriage. This caused her to become a laughingstock, and only Princess Xuanya treated her sincerely. Sister, there are so many forces here. Will something happen? Princess Lingling asked in a low voice. She felt somewhat uneasy. Princess Xuanya shook her head and said with a smile, don't worry, they are all here to help. After that, she glanced at Zhou Yalong and shook her head. I don't know if the Great Zhou dynasty will prosper in the future. It would be great if your husband could become the emperor. Ever since she knew that sword god Zhou was Zhou Xuanji, she had teased Princess Lingling many times. Without Zhou Xuanji, Princess Xuanya might have already died in Cloud Swallow City. She began to worship sword god Zhou a long time ago. She watched as sword god Zhou's name shook the world step by step, which made her look forward to meeting him again. Big sister, what are you talking about? It doesn't count. I don't even know. Princess Lingling blushed and pouted. Their voices were very soft, and the ascension platform was very noisy, so no one paid attention to their conversation. Time continued to pass. The sun was getting hotter and hotter. Noon had arrived. It's time. Shitan Chongsher suddenly shouted, his voice resounding through the sky, causing countless people to tremble in fear. However, he was the great general of the state, so no one dared to scold him. All the civil and military officials flew over and knelt in front of the tower. Zhou Yalong, Zhou Qingxin, Princess Xuanya, and the other princes and princesses also did the same. The concubines in the harem knelt beside the tower, their eyes red and heartbroken. Emperor Yan of Zhou, courtesy name Zissou, was born when Great Zhou was in danger. He wandered about, but he did not forget his roots. After learning a divine ability, he killed millions of Great Zhou's enemies with his sword. He was recognized by the previous emperor and was made the crown prince. After the previous emperor died, Zhou Zissou ascended to the throne and became the emperor. He was called the Flame Emperor, and people called him Emperor Yan of Zhou. Shitan Chongsher spoke. His voice was like a torrent, and his tone rose and fell. It was extremely inciting, causing the entire imperial city to quieten down. Millions of people began to listen to his speech. After Emperor Yan of Zhou ascended to the throne, He got rid of the surrounding demon race and shocked the other countries, leading Great Zhou to become more powerful. He started to talk endlessly about Emperor Yan of Zhou's achievements, causing the people of Great Zhou's blood to boil. Putting aside those personal matters, Emperor Yan of Zhou was indeed a qualified emperor. He was never weak to outsiders, and he was never unreasonable to his own people. He was a powerful and benevolent emperor. Great Zhou could not do without him, so he had always been the emperor. If he had stepped down 100 years earlier, he would not have needed to ascend. It had to be known that the higher one's cultivation was, the higher one's status would be after ascending. It was said that when ascending, there would be a door. Once one stepped through it, one would shed their mortal body and their cultivation would soar. How much one could soar depended on one's foundation. Shitan Chongsher spoke for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before saying, "We respectfully invite your majesty to descend." Following this, a domineering aura covered the entire city. Emperor Yan of Zhou appeared at the top of the tower, looking down at Great Zhou's officials, generals, princes, princesses, and concubines. He wore a golden emperor's robe and a crown inlaid with pearls. He looked high and mighty, and the aura of an emperor was displayed to its fullest, causing people's hearts to tremble. "Today, we have ascended, and Great Zhou is in your hands." As he spoke, he pointed at Zhou Yalong. Zhou Yalong raised his head and said excitedly, "Your son will definitely lead Great Zhou to prosperity and will not let father down." Emperor Yan of Zhou smiled in satisfaction. At this moment, the tower beneath his feet suddenly lit up with candles. In front of every windowsill on the tower, a layer of faint purple mist enveloped the tower. A powerful ray of light shot out from the sun and landed on Emperor Yan of Zhou's body. Ascension. Emperor Yan of Zhou slowly flew up and said, "From today onwards, you are the Emperor of Great Zhou. Before we ascend, we want to see you start a family and have an empress." Hearing this, Zhou Yalong immediately got up. Shitan Chongsher shouted, "Emperor Zhou Yuan's marriage ceremony has begun. Hanin Divine Sex Saintess, Su Xianxian, please ascend the ascension stage." As he spoke, waves of obscene sounds came from the edge of the royal city. A group of Hanin Divine Sect disciples carrying a red sedan chair walked through the air, and everyone in the city could see them. "They're here. I heard that Su Xianxian is Great Shang's #1 beauty. I wonder if that's true?" "It's true. Even Great Shang's emperor wants his son to marry her. It's a pity for the little evil lord. I wonder who crippled him. I heard that it was done by one of Sword God Zhou's black snakes, but it's very likely that they're trying to slander him." "Fine, everything is done by our Sword God Zhou. Haoqi Alliance is truly shameless." The entire city was filled with heaven-shaking discussions. Most people were very excited. Ascension was something that was rarely seen in a lifetime. Within the sunlight, Emperor Yan of Zhou slowly rose up, seeming to give off a divine light. Zhou Yalong turned around and took a deep breath. Even though he had never met Su Xianxian before, her beauty had spread throughout the world, so how could he not feel anticipation? Soon, the Hanin Divine Sect's red sedan chair landed. It was 800 or so meters away from Zhou Yalong, and red flowers bloomed on the ground between them, looking incredibly beautiful. Standing in front of the red sedan chair, a woman in a green dress said softly, "Miss, it's time to come out." However, she did not receive a reply. Everyone's gazes gathered on her, including Emperor Yan of Zhou's. However, Su Xianxian did not come out. Within the sedan chair, Su Xianxian, who was wearing a red veil, tightly gripped her clothes. She was currently struggling with herself. She understood that if she stepped out, she would no longer have freedom. If she did not come out, she would definitely die. Shitan Chongsher frowned. If Su Xianxian did not come out, it would be a slap to Great Zhou's face. He looked at Hanin Divine Sect's elder Zhang Lanya. Zhang Lanya's expression was also unsightly, and she immediately sent a telepathic message. Swoosh! At this moment, an air-piercing sound came. It was a sword. Wind cutter sword. It quickly landed in front of the red sedan chair and pierced into the stone surface. In that instant, everyone turned to look. "What wife? You're going to die today. Don't harm the lady." Zhou Xuanji's arrogant laughter sounded throughout the heavens and earth, causing countless people's expressions to change. Chapter 197. Wah! Great Zhou's royal city was in an uproar. Someone dared to come at such a crucial moment? Could it be? Everyone became excited and quickly guessed the identity of the newcomer. Zhou Yalong's eyes were red, and extreme murderous intent flowed out of them. Under everyone's gaze, Zhou Xuanji and the others flew over on their swords like a group of immortals. The soldiers on the city walls wanted to stop them but were all injured by Zhou Xuanji's legendary swords. On the ascension platform, everyone got up. Emperor Yan of Zhou, who was under the sunlight, narrowed his eyes. He's here indeed. Yang Zhongtian mumbled to himself with a strange smile in his eyes. The royal city was in an uproar. Sword God Zhou is here. I knew Zhou Xuanji would not let Zhou Yalong off. Is he going to fight for the throne? Teske, Sword God Zhou is too impulsive. Why didn't he wait for His Majesty to ascend before coming out? Unparalleled swords weigh in the northern wilderness, not inferior to the ancient sword emperor. This is Zhou Xuanji. He wants to prove himself in front of the emperor. Everyone began discussing excitedly. Most of them came for Sword God Zhou, so how could they not be excited when they saw Sword God Zhou coming? Stop, Emperor Yan of Zhou said. The soldiers heard him and immediately retreated. Zhou Xuanji brought Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and the others to the ascension platform. He looked down at Zhou Yalong and said, Zhou Yalong, the heavenly Tao has its own cycle, and karma and retribution will come sooner or later. Today your retribution has come. He was filled with murderous intent. This made many people nervous, especially Great Zhou's ministers and generals. They did not want anything to happen to Zhou Yalong, because if anything happened to him, Great Zhou would be finished. Zhou Xuanji could not become the lord of Great Zhou. After all, his hatred was too great. Within the red palanquin, Su Xianxuan's hands loosened her grip on her clothes. Under the red veil, she smiled slightly. Outside, Zhou Yalong looked at Zhou Xuanji furiously and said, The one who should be punished is you. The hatred of killing his mother was irreconcilable. When enemies met, their eyes turned red. He flipped his right hand, and a silver spear appeared in his hand. You killed her entire clan and massacred an entire city. Whose punishment is greater? I only killed your mother because your mother killed my mother. You even tried to kill me. Zhou Xuanji pointed at Huang Lianxin and said. His voice was so loud that everyone in the city could hear him. Huang Lianxin said furiously, Zhou Yalong, when you entered the city, my people treated you so warmly. Yet, you pretended to go berserk and slaughtered my people. How cruel is that? Why aren't you killed by the heavens and earth? Why do you still want to be the emperor of Great Zhou? I'm afraid the entire Great Zhou will be slaughtered by you in the future. Boom! The whole city was in an uproar. Countless people were dumbfounded. Zhou Yalong's reputation had always been good. Although he was not as world-shaking as Zhou Xuanji, few people had any objections to him becoming the emperor of Great Zhou. Zhou Yalong didn't panic and responded calmly. You are the Ghost Emperor tribe, and your tribe leader is Xinhao Sec's Huang Ming. You are all demons. So what if I kill you? After he had committed the crime, he had fantasized about it. Faced with such a situation, he had already memorized the lines he had prepared. Zhou Xuanji coldly snorted and said, You make it sound so dignified. They treated you warmly, but you massacred the entire city. Who wouldn't think that you are the devil? Just because the descendants of the nefarious devil are the nefarious devils? Are there definitely no devils among righteous cultivators? You don't believe your words and your methods are cruel. You are even more devilish than a devil. Just like your mother. She kills anyone she doesn't like. You are all devils disguised as righteous. Today, I'm going to kill you right here. After saying this, Zhou Xuanji raised his right hand and the God Emperor sword appeared in his hand. The God Emperor Qi wrapped around him, looking incredibly eerie. Zhou Yalong's expression immediately became unsightly. This boy's words were filled with needles and were too hurtful. Before he could say anything, Zhou Xuanji directly unleashed the heavenly lights. His sword Qi turned into the heavenly lights and shot towards Zhou Yalong incredibly quickly. They were like birds flashing past. Zhou Yalong's eyes widened and he instinctively raised his spear to block, but he was unable to dodge in time. On the ascension stage, over 10,000 people felt a powerful gust of wind blow past. Humph! A cold harumph sounded out as Lin Guanyu appeared in front of Zhou Yalong and destroyed the heavenly lights with a saber strike. Sword chi and saber chi swept out in all directions, shaking the entire ascension stage. Seeing Lin Guanyu appear, Zhou Xuanji was expressionless, and Xiao Jinghong, Jiang Shui, and the others did not panic. Daoya old man clicked his tongue in amazement and said, "Interesting." Chongming demon monarch cursed out, "Do you dare to duel with our master?" Zhou Yalong did not reply, and he savagely glared at Zhou Xuanji. Lin Guanyu raised his saber and coldly laughed as he said, "You don't know that I'm in Great Zhou?" With his strength, he was confident that he could kill Zhou Xuanji and the others. However, he was afraid that Xian Xianghua was there as well. Zhou Xuanji smirked and condescendingly laughed as he said, "You think I'm here to kill an ant like Zhou Yalong? I'm here to kill an old dog like you. Lin Guanyu, you're the Baba Blade Master. Yet you indulge your own little sister and bully the weak. You're not worthy of being called an expert." Hearing this, Lin Guanyu frowned. This boy's mouth was quite vicious. Chapter 198. Lin Guanyu charged out from the explosion, his entire body burning with a layer of white flame, allowing him to remain unscathed. His eyes were cold and sharp, and he swung his saber extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, he destroyed Zhou Xuanji's six-path sword shadow. Zhou Xuanji charged at him again, and the two began to compete in sword and saber techniques in the air. With two swords in hand, his attacks were extremely fast, and countless sword shadows appeared one after another. On the other hand, although Lin Guanyu only relied on his blade, he had the upper hand and forced Zhou Xuanji to retreat. Although Zhou Xuanji had two glorious gold legendary swords to compensate for the difference in their cultivation stages, it was still difficult for him to defeat Lin Guanyu. He was not in a hurry. After all, he had a trump card. He could use Lin Guanyu as a whetstone. The God Emperor sword and the White Dragonbone sword's power began to merge in the battle. He displayed various sword techniques and began to gradually turn the situation around. White Crane sword technique. Fiery sword art. 36 paths Jade Shao sword. Trisource vein severing sword. Soul Eater slash. Moonlit wind sword dance. Tempest Skybreaker slash. His sword techniques were endless, and his sword intents were constantly changing. Soon, Lin Guanyu was countered. In the eyes of others, Sword God Zhou's sword technique was so pleasing to the eye that it was visually stunning. He kept moving around Lin Guanyu, his sword flashing, fierce and domineering. So powerful. Zhou Xuanji is already on the same level as Baba Blade Master? So powerful. This is Sword God Zhou. Every time he appears, his strength increases by leaps and bounds. Lin Guanyu is in trouble now. See that? That's the #1 on the Northern Wilderness Prodigy leaderboard. Oh my god, could Sword God Zhou really kill Lin Guanyu? Look, even the Son of Heaven is moved. In the Imperial City, countless people exclaimed and shouted. Lin Guanyu was not from Great Zhou, and Zhou Xuanji was their prince. It was easy for them to choose a side. Moreover, almost all the people from other places wanted to watch this battle. If they had no expectations for Zhou Xuanji, why would they come? High in the sky. Zhou Xuanji used all sorts of sword wills as he pleased, which caused his battle style to change rapidly. Lin Guanyu felt a headache. It was his first time encountering such an opponent. His cultivation is only at leaving Aperture Realm, so why is his strength and speed on par with mine? Lin Guanyu thought as he gritted his teeth. Could it be that Zhou Xuanji's sword was not simple? No matter what, he must kill Zhou Xuanji. Otherwise, if he couldn't avenge his sister, his reputation would be ruined. Then, his saber speed suddenly increased. His right arm danced wildly, and his saber chi shot out and sent Zhou Xuanji flying backward. He abruptly sheathed his sword. His left hand gripped the hilt, and both his hands gripped the saber. His aura skyrocketed. In an instant, the entire world seemed to freeze. The clouds stopped, and the wind stopped. He stared fixedly at Zhou Xuanji and said, "You are powerful indeed, but a life for a life. Don't blame me for being impolite." With that said, he slashed out with his saber. The saber flashed. Everyone subconsciously closed their eyes, including Yang Zhongtian, Zhou Yalong, and Daoya old man Zhou Xuanji also closed his eyes, but his hands did not stop moving. He directly used the sky-dominating divine sword, the unparalleled sword art of the ancient sword emperors. The two swords slashed out with an indomitable will. The momentum was so strong that it seemed like it could break through all obstacles. At this moment, he was one of the 9 emperors of the sword Dao, the hegemon sword emperor. Boom! The sword Qi and saber Qi collided, causing the clouds in the sky to tremble. A wild gale blew, and the ascension stage trembled. Countless structures in the royal city trembled. Looking up, a visible shockwave appeared behind both of them, sweeping across the sky. Zhou Xuanji's purple clothes fluttered in the wind. Even though his eyes were closed, his aura was not any weaker than Lin Guanyu's. Lin Guanyu's expression changed. This was his most powerful saber art. Even though it was not beautiful, it was incredibly lethal. How could this boy block it? At that moment, Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes. This sword is called the Sky-Dominating Divine Sword, and it's the sword technique that the hegemon sword emperor used to dominate the world. Have you seen it before? He asked calmly as he looked at Lin Guanyu. His voice sounded out in everyone's ears. Sky-Dominating Divine Sword. Hegemon Sword Emperor. Zhou Xuanji had actually obtained the legacy of the 9 emperors of the Sword's Way. Lin Guanyu's expression greatly fell. The legend of the hegemon sword emperor was incredibly famous. Xian Xianghua's father had been suppressed by the hegemon sword emperor for his entire life, and he was the end of the legend. After the hegemon sword emperor ascended, there had been no such peerless person in the world. Emperor Yan of Zhou frowned and looked down at Zhou Xuanji. His gaze was a little complicated. He had fantasized about how powerful this boy would be when he grew up, but he did not expect the two of them to be so unfamiliar. Zhou Yalong's face was even more ashen. If Lin Guanyu lost, who could protect him? After witnessing Zhou Xuanji's power, he knew that he was no match for him. I've received the legacies of the Sky-Sundering Sword Emperor and the Hegemon Sword Emperor. Even though their sword techniques are not enough to convince me, it's more than enough to deal with you. Zhou Xuanji pointed his sword at Lin Guanyu and smiled proudly. He said this intentionally because he did not want to be labeled as the Hegemon Sword Emperor's successor. Sky-Sundering Sword Emperor. Lin Guanyu's face turned even darker. Just how many backers did Zhou Xuanji have? After all, he would ascend sooner or later. If he killed Zhou Xuanji, how could he explain himself to the Hegemon Sword Emperor and the Sky-Sundering Sword Emperor when he ascended? With their divine abilities, they might know about the matters of the mortal realm. The saying that the gods were watching was not groundless. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji took out the other legendary swords. The Crimson Dragon Sword, Frost Wave Sword, Swine Culling Sword, Golden Rock Sword, Heaven Sound Sword, Hell King Sword, Residual Image Sword, Thunderclap Sword, Formless Sword, Furious Ape Sword, Chicken Slaying Sword, Water Driving Sword, Falcon Sword, Magnetic Sword, Phoenix Emperor Sword, Defeating Hell King Sword, Truth Sword, Holy Light Redemption Sword, Snakeskin Sword, Frost King Icebound Sword, and so on. More than 30 legendary swords appeared behind him, all pointing at Lin Guanyu. He activated the 10,000 Sword Dragon incantation straight away. All the legendary swords gathered dragon-shaped sword chi and coiled around their blades. The scene was majestic, and countless people's blood boiled. It's coming! Sword God Zhou's most famous sword technique was coming. No one knew what this sword technique was called, but it was powerful and cool. Anyone who saw it would be fascinated. Is Lin Guanyu going to lose? No wonder he's so overpowered. Even the 2 ancient sword emperors were convinced by him. I heard that Sword God Zhou could manifest a sword will in an earth-grade sword technique within a day. Even the 9 emperors of the Sword's Way could not compare to him. Can you stop exaggerating? Although I admire Zhou Xuanji, how can his talent be so ridiculous? So domineering. I heard that Zhou Xuanji's goal is 10,000 swords soaring in the sky. Do you think he can do it? The tens of millions of people in the city discussed excitedly, and there were even many people who flew into the air to get a better look. Zhou Xuanji dashed toward Lin Guanyu, and all the legendary swords followed closely behind. The white dragon coiled around the God Emperor, and the other dragon-shaped sword Qi followed behind as though they were following the Dragon King. Lin Guanyu stopped thinking and began swinging his blade. No matter what, he must kill Zhou Xuanji today. Let's talk about the future in the future. Clang! The blade and sword clashed. Zhou Xuanji smiled, And all the legendary swords slashed at Lin Guanyu crazily as though they had a mind of their own, catching him off guard. Chapter 199. Clang, clang, clang. Although Lin Guanyu appeared to be in a sorry state when he was surrounded by dozens of divine swords, he still managed to fend them off. Xueqi felt more and more satisfied. He could also use the glorious gold legendary swords consecutively. The coordination between the legendary swords was also increasing. He was using Lin Guanyu to practice his sword. What's going on? Why are these swords getting stronger and faster? Cold sweat broke out on Lin Guanyu's forehead. Even though his cultivation was strong, he couldn't withstand the attacks of so many divine swords. Very quickly, the Hell King's sword pierced through his shoulder, and fresh blood splattered out. The people on the ascension platform widened their eyes. Lin Guanyu was injured first? Amazing! Princess Xuanya exclaimed. After speaking, she hurriedly covered her mouth, afraid that someone would hear. Zhou Qingxin looked at Zhou Xuanji with a complicated expression. Back then at the Xie sect, Zhou Xuanji had to avoid even Xie Wuyo's fury. But now, he could injure Lin Guanyu. How many years had it been? Thinking about himself, his cultivation had barely broken through a small realm. Compared to Zhou Xuanji, he felt like he had been living like a pig all these years. Lu Longlin murmured, "Is he going to make it into the Northern Wilderness top 100? If he defeated Lin Guanyu, Zhou Xuanji could replace his ranking." When the others heard this, they all swallowed their saliva. At this moment, they felt an indescribable sense of shock. It was as if they were witnessing the rise of a legend. Top 100 of the Northern Wilderness in his early 20s? No one had ever done it before, and probably no one would be able to do it in the future. From the red palanquin, Su Xianxian walked out in her wedding dress. She took off her red veil and looked up at the battle between Zhou Xuanji and Lin Guanyu. This scene was seen by Zhou Yalong, and he was instantly enraged. Previously, this woman refused to come out, but now she came out. Wasn't this a slap to his face? Wait till I ascend to the throne, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. Zhou Yalong roared in his heart. The more majestic Zhou Xuanji was, the more irritated he felt. At this moment, Lin Guanyu suddenly landed on the ascension platform. There were many sword wounds on his body, and his aura had become chaotic. He looked up at Zhou Xuanji, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Zhou Xuanji, I admit that you are powerful. You are indeed worthy of the Sky-Sundering Sword Emperor and Hegemon Sword Emperor's legacies. Lin Guanyu said in a deep voice. He raised the saber in his hand horizontally, and the gravel under his feet flew up. The little black snake muttered, "Is this guy going to risk his life?" Jiang Shui scoffed. So what? It's still hard to defeat Xian Ji. Although she said that, she was still very surprised. It was the same for the others. They did not expect Zhou Xuanji to be able to face Lin Guanyu head-on and gain the upper hand. In these 3 years, Zhou Xuanji had been cultivating, and no one knew his true power. The moment the divine sword was unsheathed and revealed its sharpness, it truly amazed them. My little disciple is about to soar into the sky. Daoya old man sighed as he stroked his beard. He knew very well what defeating Lin Guanyu meant. Huang Lianxin was the most excited, because she was about to take revenge. Zhou Xuanji gripped the 2 swords in his hands, his body hanging upside down as he spun and dived downwards. All of the legendary swords wrapped around his body and descended as well, looking like a storm of sword qi descending from the sky. Lin Guanyu gripped his saber with both hands and slashed upwards. Wherever the saber pointed, the ground cracked, and saber qi soared into the sky. A loud bang resounded. It shook heaven and earth. It tore apart all noise. The ascension stage tilted from the pressure, and everyone flew up to avoid being injured. Su Xianxian looked at Zhou Xuanji, a look of shock on her face. So he's so powerful, and his face isn't so ordinary. She looked quite dazed as she looked at Zhou Xuanji's unfamiliar handsome face. Thinking back to the reason she had teamed up with Zhou Xuanji, she felt quite complicated. She felt a bit awkward but also a bit sweet. Perhaps this was fate. Zhou Yalong would occasionally look at her, and seeing her like this, he almost exploded in anger. He immediately rushed at Su Xianxian, preparing to teach her a lesson. Zhang Lanya noticed his actions and immediately blocked behind Su Xianxian. No matter what, Su Xianxian was the Hanyin divine sect saintess. How could she allow others to get close? Moreover, Zhou Yalong's expression made it seem as if he was going to kill someone. Emperor Zhou, what are you doing? Zhang Lanya asked in a low voice. She intentionally used the words Emperor Zhou to remind Zhou Yalong that his status was not the same as before. Hearing this, Zhou Yalong immediately stopped and deeply breathed in, doing his best to calm his emotions. However, Su Xianxian still did not look back. Her mind was not on him at all. Bitch. Zhou Yalong thought with gritted teeth. Zhang Lanya also noticed Su Xianxuan's gaze, but she did not remind her. The reason was simple and practical. She was also convinced by Zhou Xuanji's power. If Su Xianxian married Zhou Xuanji, it might not be a bad thing. Zhou Xuanji was also a prince of Great Zhou and could fight for the position of emperor. He was so powerful that only the sect lord could rival him. The most important thing was Zhou Xuanji's potential. He was already in the northern wilderness top 100 at the age of 20. Back then, even Xian Xianghua and Yang Di were not so powerful. Once they roped in Zhou Xuanji, the Hanyin divine sect would have a chance to soar. The more Zhang Lanya thought about it, the more she liked Zhou Xuanji. Looking at Zhou Yalong again, why did she feel that this guy was so weak? He was not good enough for Su Xianxian. If Zhou Yalong knew what Zhang Lanya was thinking, he would surely vomit blood in anger. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji bounced away suddenly. After a backflip, he turned into countless afterimages and charged toward Lin Guanyu in a straight line. He was extremely fast. Like a bolt of lightning. Pshhh. Lin Guanyu's chest was split open, and blood splattered all over the ground. Zhou Xuanji landed behind him with blood dripping from the tips of his swords. In that instant, the heavens and earth fell silent. Everyone was tongue-tied and could not believe their eyes. What sword technique is this? Lin Guanyu's expression froze as he mumbled to himself. That slash was too fast. It was so fast that even his eyes could not capture it. With his back facing him, Zhou Xuanji said softly, 10,000 ultimate steps. This was the first time he had used 10,000 ultimate steps against an enemy. You created it? Lin Guanyu asked. He had never heard of this sword technique before, but it was so powerful. If it existed long ago, it would surely be remembered in history. Zhou Xuanji did not reply. He turned around and pointed his sword at the back of Lin Guanyu's head. Before you die, do you have anything to say? Lin Guanyu laughed louder and louder. Finally, he raised his head and guffawed. Swoosh! At this moment, an air-piercing sound came. Zhou Xuanji raised his left hand instinctively and slashed with the white dragonbone sword. A black sword fell to the ground. He knew who it was without looking back. The sword monarch of Great Zhou. A silhouette flew over from the horizon on a sword. He wore a black robe, and his black hair danced in the wind. His eyes were sharp, and he held a black sword in his hand. Behind him were 4 similar black swords. Zhou Xuanji, today is the day of His Majesty's ascension. It is the day of the new emperor's ascension. Are you sure you want to kill someone here? The sword monarch cried out. His voice was righteous and resounded across the entire city. Zhou Xuanji glanced at him and said, Who do you think you are? Do you have the right to tell me what to do here? He did not hold back at all. The sword monarch did not come earlier or later. He came at this moment to gain a good reputation. But would Zhou Xuanji give him face? Chapter 200. Who do you think you are? The sword monarch heard him and could not maintain his composure. He was one of the most famous cultivators in Great Zhou. Zhou Xuanji was once a junior to him. How could he be humiliated like this? Zhou Xuanji, you killed your own sister and mother, and now you want to kill them as well. Are you not afraid of retribution? The sword monarch said with a deep voice. If he allowed Zhou Xuanji to kill Lin Guanyu, Zhou Yalong would die for sure. If Zhou Yalong died, Great Zhou would be finished. Zhou Xuanji did not want to be the emperor, and he was not suitable to be the emperor. In such a situation, he had to protect Zhou Yalong. Zhou Xuanji looked at him sideways and said, Do you really deserve to be the sword monarch? Back then, the Empress of Great Zhou hunted me and my mother. My mother died to protect me, and I was homeless when I was 2 years old. Do you know what I went through to reach where I am today? There are no geniuses in this world. Behind the talent, there are hardships that ordinary people can't imagine. I'm still underage, and the Empress of Great Zhou wanted to kill me. To avenge her mother and to protect herself, if it were you, would you be able to endure it? Lin Guanyu took revenge for his sister. I respect him as a hero. This is how the world is. Death is not unbearable. Only one of us can live. But this is a fight between gentlemen, a fight between powerful cultivators. No one will complain about who lives or dies. Zhou Yalong massacred the entire city. Even if the heavens and earth destroy him, he could not escape death. This is also for the future of Great Zhou. And you? You distort the truth and cannot tell right from wrong. How can someone like you be a grandmaster in the sword's way? How can you be the sword monarch? How can you be worthy of the respect and trust of the billions of people in Great Zhou? Zhou Xuanji's words were like pearls in a loud and clear voice. He did not give the sword monarch any chance to interrupt. His chest heaved and his face turned green from anger. The millions of people in the city heard him and could not help but hate the sword monarch. Zhou Xuanji said it openly and vividly, showing the heroism of a real man. On the other hand, the sword monarch seemed so hypocritical. Who dares to be his enemy? Not only will he die, but he will also lose his reputation. The little black snake sighed in amazement on Chongming Demon's shoulder. I want to learn. Jiang Shui covered her mouth and laughed. I haven't seen anyone win against Xuanji in an argument. In her eyes, no matter what kind of mystery it was good, it made her proud. This is talent. This kid hasn't seen many people since he was young, but his eloquence is amazing, just like his mother. Daoya old man was deeply moved. Seeing that the sword monarch of Great Zhou was rendered speechless, he felt great. Within the sunlight, Emperor Yan of Zhou, who was still rising, tightly frowned. If one looked closely, one would notice that the corners of his mouth were curled up. Over the years, he and the sword monarch of Great Zhou had been on bad terms. He was most worried that after he left, Zhou Yalong would not be able to intimidate the sword monarch. But now, Zhou Xuanji had suppressed the sword monarch to the point that he could not even breathe. Ignorant child. It's obviously murder, but you have to make it sound so dignified. The sword monarch rebuked furiously. He was already on the losing side. He thought that he could give Zhou Xuanji and Lin Guanyu a way out, but he did not expect Zhou Xuanji to reject it. Lin Guanyu seemed to have lost, but it was extremely difficult for Zhou Xuanji to kill him. Baba Blade Master's fearsome reputation was built on countless corpses. Do you know what a man's pride is? To fight for your heart, to fight for your emotions. Do you know that? Zhou Xuanji snorted disdainfully. As he spoke, the Frost King's icebound sword shot out swiftly. Ranged sword propelling. The tip of the sword pointed straight at the sword monarch. The sword monarch raised his sword instinctively, but he was still a step too slow. PFFTT. The Frost King's icebound sword pierced the sword monarch's shoulder. Next, a cold chi seeped out and froze him into an ice sculpture. Wah! Countless people were shocked. He killed the sword monarch with just one slash? How powerful was sword god Zhou now? They could all tell that the Frost King's icebound sword was not Zhou Xuanji's best sword, but it could still explode with such power. Shocking! Lin Guanyu turned around suddenly and slashed at Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji was prepared and blocked with both swords, but he was still pushed back. You want to kill me? You don't have that ability. Lin Guanyu laughed coldly, his eyes cold. On the other side, the sword monarch broke out of the ice and looked at Zhou Xuanji in fear. The Frost King's icebound sword flew back to Zhou Xuanji's side. He looked at Lin Guanyu, then at the sword monarch, and suddenly laughed. Both of you want to kill me? Why don't the two of you come at me together? Zhou Xuanji laughed condescendingly, which caused all the spectators to open their eyes wide. Big brother! Don't be reckless! The little black snake cried out immediately. If Zhou Xuanji died, they would not be able to leave Great Zhou alive. Chongming Demon Monarch pulled him down and scolded. Shut up! When has our master not been reckless before? But he is reckless, and he has the power to be reckless. Just watch. Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and the others stared at the little black snake with unfriendly gazes. Zhou Yalong cried out suddenly. Sword Monarch! Don't be calculative now. Attack together. He was the one who invited the Sword Monarch to guard against the current situation. At the same time, he felt anxious in his heart. Why hadn't Xueqi appeared yet? These days, he had been praising Xueqi every day. Now that Xueqi had disappeared, he felt terrible. Of course, it was possible that Xueqi was waiting in the dark. The Sword Monarch immediately flew towards Zhou Xuanji and Lin Guanyu. Lin Guanyu frowned and said, "Aren't you being too arrogant?" He was wary in his heart. This brat definitely did not have good intentions. Zhou Xuanji smiled and let go of his hands. The God Emperor sword and white dragonbone sword flew to his side. The God Emperor sword and white dragon on his body disappeared as well. Following this, a long sword that gave off a sinister aura appeared in his hand. Sky Extinguishing Sword. The moment this sword appeared, Lin Guanyu quickly retreated in fear. The Sword Monarch also stopped and looked at the Sky Extinguishing Sword in fear. Evidently, the sword that Zhou Xuanji took out was the most powerful sword that he thought he had. It could even kill the two of them with a single strike. This sword is called Sky Extinguishing Sword. It can bury the heavens and destroy the Great Dipper of the world. Zhou Xuanji said with a loud laugh. He held the sword with one hand and the dozens of legendary swords behind his back, looking incredibly domineering. After that, he gripped the sword with both hands and twisted his body. He bent down and furiously slashed out. Boom! A black sword chi swept toward Lin Guanyu with incredible speed. Lin Guanyu's expression changed drastically. Unable to dodge, he instinctively raised his saber to block. The sword chi swept past and shattered the saber's blade. His body was engulfed by the black sword chi, and not even his bones were left. The sword chi swept out, and everyone on both sides felt as if they were facing death. In the blink of an eye, the sword chi flew 10,000 meters away and destroyed the palace. Dust flew everywhere, and the entire Great Zhou's royal city violently shook. Silence. Everyone looked at Zhou Xuanji dumbfounded, including Xiao Jinghong, Daoya Old Man, Zhao Congjian, and the others. Even Emperor Yan of Zhou opened his eyes wide, as if he had seen a ghost. The Sword Monarch's face turned pale, and his body stiffened. Chapter 201. How is this possible? Zhou Yalong was dumbfounded, muttering to himself, his body trembling uncontrollably. That was Lin Guanyu. She was his greatest backer. Baba Blade Master. He was instantly killed just like that? Tens of millions of people were shocked by Zhou Xuanji's domineering sword strike. At that moment, the ascension platform suddenly split open. The crack that was thousands of feet long split the ascension platform into two halves. Countless pieces of sand and stones rained down on the imperial city. The civil and military officials and guests quickly retreated in fear, staying far away from Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji maintained the posture of swinging his sword. He looked domineering, but he was actually weak. Damn! Isn't this too fierce? His face was expressionless, but he exclaimed in his heart. It was not because of the power of the Sky Extinguishing Sword, but because it had consumed too much of his spiritual power. He was almost emptied in an instant. Fortunately, the Tianxia map began to take effect. It provided him with an endless supply of spiritual power, so he did not collapse. As expected of an ancient treasure, it was awesome. Zhou Xuanji inwardly rejoiced. Even though the Heavenly Soul legendary swords were powerful, the price was too great. No wonder it could only be used by those at astral projection. If he was only at the 10th level of the nascent soul realm, he would have died on the spot. He glanced over and saw that the Sword Monarch was already scared out of his wits. Awesome! Do you know how powerful I am now? Just as he was feeling pleased, a shocking uproar broke out in the Great Zhou Imperial City. Lin Guanyu is dead? Oh my god! What was with that sword just now? Am I seeing things? What a terrifying sword technique. Even though I'm so far away from that black sword chi, I still feel like I'm facing death. So, Zhou Xuanji had been hiding his strength all along. Just how powerful is he? Perhaps even if Emperor Yan of Zhou personally came, he would not be able to defeat him. Everyone was talking excitedly, and most of them were so excited that their faces were red. Chongming Demon Monarch and the little black snake howled in excitement. Zhao Congjian clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, That's amazing. He also wanted to learn this sword move. Xiao Jinghong took a deep breath. He realized that he could not see through Zhou Xuanji more and more. He had watched Zhou Xuanji grow up every day, but Zhou Xuanji's power far exceeded his expectations. The others sighed, and Daoya old man clapped his hands in delight. Xuanji is really too powerful. How can I catch up to him? Jiang Shui sighed, but her face was filled with pride. Although she wanted to protect Zhou Xuanji was so powerful, so how could she not be happy? Su Xianxian and Zhang Lanya were overjoyed. The former was purely pleasantly surprised, while the latter was trying to rope Zhou Xuanji in. Emperor Yan of Zhou's expression flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. The great general of the state, Shitan Chongshi, glanced at him from time to time, then at Zhou Xuanji, as though he was thinking about something. Lu Longlin was so excited that he murmured to himself in a trembling voice. Top 100 of the Northern Wilderness. Northern Wilderness Top 100. He had personally received Zhou Xuanji and nominated him for the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. If he also nominated him for the Northern Wilderness Top 100, his position in the Songhai Ziggurat would skyrocket. Just thinking about it made him feel as if the pinnacle of his life had arrived. Yang Zhongtian sighed. If not for Xian Xianghua, they would have been able to rope in Zhou Xuanji back then. What a pity, what a pity. Zhou Yalong was frightened to the point of retreating repeatedly. His expression was one of unwillingness, hatred, terror, and disbelief. At that moment, he was completely panicking. Zhou Xuanji looked at the sword monarch and coldly laughed as he said, Old coarse fellow, what else do you have to say? Wasn't this old fellow trying to show off? Keep pretending. From today onwards, you will no longer be a standard by which I measure my enemy's strength. You're too weak. Zhou Xuanji inwardly felt quite pleased, but his expression was calm. The calmer he looked, the more panicked the sword monarch became. What, you don't dare to speak anymore? Zhou Xuanji said as he disdainfully laughed. He purposely tried to stall for time and wait for his spirit energy to recover. It had to be said that the Tianxia map was incredibly domineering. With this endless supply of spirit energy, it would not be long before his spirit energy completely recovered and he could once again unleash the sky-extinguishing sword. The sword monarch's expression was grim, and he did not know what to say. He would either lose face or die. That sword strike just then was simply too terrifying. Looking at Zhou Xuanji, it was evident that he could unleash a second strike. I'll count to 3. Either you tell me that Senior is powerful, that I'm ashamed of my inferiority, and that I shouldn't have interfered, or you can die, Zhou Xuanji said as he sinisterly laughed. Zhou Xuanji said with a sinister smile. After that, he began counting down. When he counted to 2, the sword monarch's body trembled. He immediately cried out, Senior is powerful, that I'm ashamed of my inferiority, and that I shouldn't have interfered. After that, he left dejectedly. He fled extremely quickly, afraid that he would be too slow. Zhou Xuanji looked at Emperor Yan of Zhou and said, You have your own rules. After all, you are the emperor. At first, I hated you, but now, I understand your difficulties. Hearing this, Emperor Yan of Zhou smiled. His son had grown up. Actually, it was not a bad idea to pass the position of emperor to Zhou Xuanji. But I will not forgive you. Our relationship as father and son has already been severed. Me killing your son has nothing to do with our previous relationship. Today, I will kill him in front of you. Let's see if you will choose to ascend or save your son. Zhou Xuanji continued to speak before walking toward Zhou Yalong. Emperor Yan of Zhou's expression froze. The slap in the face came too quickly, and he did not expect it. Once he began to ascend, he could not back out. If he stepped out of the sunlight, he would no longer have the opportunity to ascend, and his lifespan would only be 100 years. Nothing was absolute. Perhaps there was another way, but it was too difficult. No one could give up, and it could even be said that they dared to give up. Zhou Yalong panicked. He immediately cried out, Zong Kuaming, why aren't you coming out? Hanin Divine Sect, why aren't you coming out? Are you going to watch me be killed by this sinner? He did not beg for mercy because he understood that begging for mercy was useless. Either he would die or Zhou Xuanji would die. He did not even have any hope of escaping. Zhang Lanya fell silent. A wise man submits to circumstances. Her gaze was gentle as she looked at Zhou Xuanji, and the more she looked, the more satisfied she became. Seeing her expression, Su Xianxian immediately understood. Her face became bright red, and with her heavy makeup and wedding dress, she looked as beautiful as a painting. At that moment, a figure appeared in front of Zhou Xianlong. It was Zhong Kueiming. Seeing him, Zhou Yalong let out a sigh of relief. Shitan Changsher slightly frowned and could not help but look at Emperor Yan of Zhou in the sky. Zhong Kueiming began to size up Zhou Xuanji, his gaze incredibly oppressive. He suddenly laughed and said, "Your spirit energy is already lacking, so you're just a paper tiger." Hearing this, everyone's eyes widened. Zhou Xuanji slightly narrowed his eyes and stopped walking. Zhong Kueiming, another one of the Northern Wilderness Top 100, Daoya old man frowned, feeling a headache coming on. Zhou Xuanji's life. Wasn't it too unlucky? He was only 22 years old, and he had already encountered so many of the Northern Wilderness Top 100. So he was pretending. No wonder he let the Sword Monarch go. Quickly cripple him. I'm going to kill him myself. Zhou Yalong said excitedly. He could no longer care about the Crown Prince's demeanor, and his face and neck were red from excitement. Chapter 202. Do you have confidence in dealing with that guy? Chongming Demon Monarch asked Daoya old man in a low voice. Zhong Kueiming did not look like someone to be trifled with, and he could tell Zhou Xuanji's attitude at a glance. Danger! Daoya old man glared at him and said snappily, Zhong Kueiming is in the top 100 of the Northern Wilderness. How do you expect me to deal with him? He couldn't even beat Lin Guanyu, so how could he beat Zhong Kueiming? Jiang Shui, Huang Lianxin, Xiao Jinghong, and the others became nervous when they heard this. They were prepared to act at any moment. Even if they died, they would die with Zhou Xuanji. Master, should we save him? Su Xianxian asked Zhang Lanya softly. She had already seen through Zhang Lanya's thoughts, but she didn't point it out. Instead, she took the opportunity to let Zhang Lanya make a move. Zhang Lanya frowned and said, It's not that I don't want to save him, but I'm not a match for Zhong Kueiming. Unless their sect master came personally, who could do anything to Zhong Kueiming? Zhong Kueiming looked at Zhou Xuanji playfully, as though he was looking at his prey. Zhou Xuanji looked calm and was not in a hurry to act. The Tianxia map was quickly supplying him with spiritual power, so he did not panic. If worst comes to worst, both sides will perish together. What are you waiting for? Wait for him to recover? He was able to kill Lin Guanyu with one strike. Zhou Yalong urged anxiously. He did not want to give Zhou Xuanji a chance to turn the tables. Zhong Kueiming ignored him and looked up at Emperor Yan of Zhou in the sky as he smiled and said, Emperor of Zhou, why do I feel that your youngest son is even more powerful? If he can become the Emperor of Great Zhou, the Great Zhou might be able to rival the Hunyuan Empire in the future. The moment he said this, the expressions of the Great Zhou dynasty's officials changed. It didn't matter if they didn't compete. Just one comparison was enough to kill. In today's battle, Zhou Yalong was much weaker than Zhou Xuanji. As generals and ministers who served Great Zhou, they were indeed convinced by Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji's boldness and power far surpassed Zhou Yalong's. He was more suitable to be the emperor of Great Zhou. However, this was an internal affair of the royal family, so it was not appropriate for them to intervene. Emperor Yan of Zhou was expressionless and did not speak. He looked at Zhou Xuanji, a look of pity in his eyes. He admitted that he was moved by Zhou Xuanji's talent, but it was a pity that things were like this, and there was no other way. Zhong Kueiming, don't act recklessly. He's an evil demon. How can he be the son of heaven? Zhou Yalong shouted in a low voice. He also hated high sect Kueiming in his heart. Saying such words at this time was clearly toying with him, making him unable to get out of this embarrassing situation. At this moment, Zhong Kueiming raised his left foot and prepared to walk toward Zhou Xuanji. All of them looked terrified. Tanhua sect was led by Xian Xianghua, and below her were the 3 demon chiefs. They were terrifyingly powerful and could summon clouds and rain with a flip of their hands. After Tanhua sect declined, they disappeared without a trace. Some said that they had fallen, while others said that they had ascended. Now, very few people remembered them. Who would have thought that Zhong Kueiming was the life-devouring demon chief? Emperor Yan of Zhou's expression changed. He stared at Zhong Kueiming and said with gritted teeth, "You really hid yourself well." With the life-devouring demon chief's cultivation, he did not need his help back then. So it was all a scheme. Zhong Kueiming laughed sinisterly. "I did not want to reveal my identity, but since you dared to attack our Tanhua sect's vice-sect lord, how could I just stand by and watch? Emperor Yan of Zhou, you invited so many friends, but how many of them were willing? You are too stupid. Don't you know why I agreed?" His words were like slaps to Emperor Yan of Zhou's face, loud and clear. Zhou Xuanji's expression changed and cursed in his heart. Fudge! Again. It was not easy for him to clear his name. Now, a life-devouring demon chief jumped out and said that he was the vice-sect lord. Damn it! Xian Xianghua, can't you change your routine? Jiang Shui, Huang Lianxin, Zhao Congjian, and the others also looked at Zhou Xuanji with a strange expression. Xian Xianghua treats you so well, Jiang Shui said faintly. Jiang Shui said faintly, her tone full of jealousy. Zhou Xuanji was speechless. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. On the other side, Zhong Kueiming pulled his hand out of Zhou Yalong's body. Black flames burned on his hand and burned Zhou Yalong's heart into ashes. I have absorbed all of his spirit energy. Vice-sect lord, I will leave him to you to kill. After that, Zhong Kueiming threw the feeble Zhou Yalong to Zhou Xuanji. Chongming Demon Monarch caught him and spat on Zhou Yalong's face. Brat, weren't you very arrogant? He cursed. Zhou Yalong, who was in despair, was woken up by his spit. Sensing the gazes from all directions, he was extremely ashamed and wished that he was dead. Chapter 203. Seeing Zhou Yalong being carried by Chongming Demon Monarch like a sack, the entire city was in an uproar. Millions of people cried out in alarm, not daring to believe their eyes and ears. Life-devouring demon head? Oh my god, this turn of events. Could Zhou Xuanji really be the vice-sect lord of Tanhua sect? Are you stupid? It's obvious that the Tanhua sect wants to rope in Zhou Xuanji. With such talent, who wouldn't be tempted? You're right. Sword God Zhou has never done anything evil. The strong can strengthen themselves. Sword God Zhou doesn't need to rely on any faction. Cries of surprise rose and fell from every corner of the city. Zhong Kueiming's reversal was truly too unexpected. Now, even if Emperor Yan of Zhou came down, it would be difficult to salvage the situation. Zhou Xuanji looked at Huang Lianxin and said, "Go and take revenge." His gaze returned to Zhong Kueiming. This fellow was looking at him with a faint smile, giving him a headache. Tanhua sect's vice-sect leader. This is troublesome. Now that Zhou Xuanji had been targeted by the Tanhua sect, the Hanyin divine sect did not dare to get involved. Everyone in the Tanhua sect wanted to kill them, and the Hanyin divine sect did not want to associate themselves with them. Su Xianxian did not think too much. Seeing that Zhou Xuanji was out of danger, she felt at ease. Lu Longlin, Yun Zhongtian, Shitan Changsher, and the other experts were all thinking about Zhou Xuanji's relationship with the Tanhua sect. Seeing Zhou Xuanji and the others' expressions, it was evident that they did not expect this either. Zhou Yalong. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. You are cruel and heartless, killing the innocent. Today you should pay for it. Be a good person in your next life. Huang Lianxin said solemnly. After that, she took out her sword and chopped off Zhou Yalong's head. Zhong Kueiming sucked away all of his spiritual energy, causing Zhou Yalong's soul to be unable to leave his body. His life force was directly severed, and he died in the sky above the great Zhou royal city. One of the northern wilderness twin dragons had fallen. He died miserably, without even the ability to retaliate. The entire city was silent. Everyone craned their necks to see Emperor Yan of Zhou's reaction. Emperor Yan of Zhou's expression was grim, and his hands were clenched into fists within his sleeves, evidently suppressing his anger. He had already risen tens of thousands of feet into the sky and could shatter the void at any time. What was the point of continuing to fight at this time? Zhong Kueiming, you will regret this sooner or later. He would ascend first and wait for Zhong Kueiming in the upper realm. At that time, he would tear Zhong Kueiming into 1,000 pieces. All I know is that you regret it now. Zhong Kueiming said in disdain, Tanhua in the human world, Azura in hell. The Tanhua sect will soon dominate the northern wilderness region once again. Just watch from above. Emperor Yen of Zhou was infuriated, but he did not muster up the courage to step out of the ascension light. Soon, Emperor Yen of Zhou followed the light of ascension and disappeared above the sea of clouds. Internal strife. Internal strife. Zhou Zixu, in the end, it's your own incompetence. You can't blame others. Daoya old man stroked his beard and sighed. He knew about Emperor Yen of Zhou's matters. The reason why Emperor Yen of Zhou was able to become the emperor was because of the merciful Melody Cliff and Lin Guanyu's help. Because of this, he was very patient with the empress. Unfortunately, he was also a sentimental person, which led to today's disaster. The ones who were truly suffering were Zhou Xuanji and Zhou Yalong. However, Zhou Yalong's death was due to his evil intentions and willfully slaughtering the innocent. What should we do now? Shall we go or? Xiao Jinghong asked Zhou Xuanji. Now that Zhou Yalong was dead, Great Zhou was like a group of dragons without a leader. The Great Zhou dynasty was like a group of dragons without a leader. To them they could come and go as they pleased. Most importantly, Zhou Xuanji had the qualifications to seize the throne. Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "What's the point of being the emperor? It's more satisfying to be the emperor's backer." Everyone was stunned. Zhou Xuanji waved at Zhou Qingxin and said, "Zhou Qingxin, come here quickly." Great Zhou's seventh prince. Although his cultivation talent was not good, this boy's character was not bad. He had a good eye for people. Zhou Qingxin heard him and was stunned. He then flew toward Zhou Xuanji uneasily. Shitan Chongshe frowned. He began to think about how to persuade Zhou Xuanji. Zhong Kueiming stood where he was and looked around in amusement. With him around, no one dared to touch Zhou Xuanji. Of course, Zhou Xuanji's own strength was enough to make everyone wary. Greetings. Senior Sword God Zhou. Zhou Qingxin carefully cupped his fists and greeted. If Zhou Xuanji wanted to kill him, he could only accept his fate. Do you want to be the emperor of Great Zhou? Zhou Xuanji asked calmly. He had already started to plan in his heart. He wanted to be the man above Great Zhou. If he became the emperor himself, he would have a headache just thinking about the politics. Moreover, once he became the emperor, he would not be able to run away whenever he wanted. Most importantly, being the emperor of Great Zhou wouldn't be of much help to him. Zhou Qingxin was stunned. He could not believe what he had heard. On the other side, Lu Longlin could not hold back his excitement. He took out a scroll and wrote on it with his trembling right hand. Northern Wilderness Top 100. Northern Wilderness Top 100. After today's battle, Zhou Xuanji had become a god. Once the news spread, it was hard to imagine what kind of shock would befall the Northern Wilderness region. The youngest Northern Wilderness Top 100 in history. Earth-shattering. Yang Zhongtian looked at Zhou Xuanji with a passionate gaze. No one knew what he was thinking about. A while later, Zhou Xuanji patted Zhou Qingxin's shoulder. This boy had already fallen into a daze and was completely dumbfounded. He turned to look at Great Zhou's royal city and said, "I recommend the seventh prince, Zhou Qingxin, to be the emperor of Great Zhou. If he becomes the emperor, I will help if Great Zhou is in danger. If not for him, Great Zhou will have nothing to do with me from now on." After saying this, he turned and left. Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and the others followed closely behind. Seeing this, Zhong Kueiming quickly followed up. Everyone in the air was stunned. He left just like that? Princess Xuanya opened her beautiful eyes wide and complained to Princess Lingling. If he knew that you suffered because of him, he would surely bring you away. In response, Princess Lingling smiled and said, "It's not his fault. He has his own path. Everyone has their own fate. He has already set a good example for me." A dead person appeared out of nowhere and overturned everyone's understanding. She rarely saw such a story in the ancient myths. That's right. Zhou Xuanji could be described as a myth. She had a premonition that countless years later, Zhou Xuanji would be like the blazing sun that shone down on the world. At the same time, Su Xianxian was also looking at Zhou Xuanji's direction. She did not feel regretful or sad. Instead, she was very excited. She had been praying for someone to save her. Now that her dream had come true, she did not dare to ask for anything more. Maybe I should be as brave as him. His predicament is much more difficult than mine. Su Xianxian mumbled to herself. She remembered Zhou Xuanji's words. There is no such thing as an absolute genius. Behind a genius, there was always an unimaginable amount of hard work. Shitan Changshe did not stop Zhou Xuanji and the others. He could only look at Zhou Qingxin. He frowned deeply. Zhou Qingxin was suitable to be the emperor? But Zhou Xuanji's words were too tempting. As long as Zhou Qingxin was the emperor, he would be Great Zhou's backer. Chapter 204. After leaving the Great Zhou Imperial City, the group landed in a forest. Zhou Xuanji landed on the ground and began meditating to recover his qi. Daoya old man clicked his tongue in wonder and asked, "Are you really willing to give up the throne?" For the vast majority of men, who would give up the throne that was within their grasp? With just a word from Zhou Xuanji, the ministers of Great Zhou would definitely push him to the throne. Moreover, Zhou Xuanji had the monarchical violet qi. He was born to be an emperor. Everyone else looked at Zhou Xuanji, wanting to see what he had to say. How many years does it take to manage a dynasty? Zhou Xuanji asked without opening his eyes. Daoya old man said in a low voice, "Emperor Yan of Zhou has been on the throne for nearly 2,000 years, which is why Great Zhou is so prosperous today. Now that you have taken over, you just need to guard the gates of Great Zhou." Even though Great Zhou wasn't the strongest dynasty, it wasn't weak either. I'm 22 years old now and I've already made it to the Northern Wilderness Top 100. Do you think I can become the world's #1 in 100 years? If I were to spend my time governing the dynasty, how much time would I need to climb to #1 in the world? Zhou Xuanji continued to ask. According to his understanding, the human empires were actually puppets of the 8 sanctums. Looking at Emperor Yan of Zhou, he had to call Lu Longlin brother. "Are you so sure that dynasty will only drag you down?" Daoya old man said snappily, "Although you're powerful, it's not good to wander around like this, right? Among the top 10 of the Northern Wilderness Top 100, which one of them did not control a powerful force? Even someone as powerful as Xian Xianghua had to control the Tanhua sect." He was worried that Zhou Xuanji would go to a dead end and think that as long as he was powerful enough, nothing would be a problem. Little did they know that in this world, no matter how strong an individual was, they could not be stronger than the hearts of others. The Tanhua sect was an example. The others were also pondering this question. Zhong Kueiming smiled proudly and said, "Being the deputy sect leader of our Tanhua sect is much more impressive than being the emperor of the empire." However, no one paid attention to him. In the current Northern Wilderness region, which one is more powerful? The empires or the sanctums? Zhou Xuanji asked again without opening his eyes. Daoya old man was stunned. He squinted his eyes and said, "Of course it's the Holy Land. Empires and sects are similar in nature. They both gather together and gather resources. Empires focus on population, while sects focus on inheritance. Empires replace each other, and only the Holy Land is indestructible over time." Could it be that Zhou Xuanji wanted to create a sanctum? How ambitious! This was much more difficult than inheriting the throne. Sects focus on cultivation, and management is secondary. Dynasties focus on management, and cultivation will fall behind. Therefore, join the Tanhua sect. Throughout the history of the Tanhua sect, there have been more than 10 experts who have ascended. All of them have dominated the world and are even more domineering than the sacred grounds. Zhong Kueiming interrupted with an excited expression. Zhou Xuanji's talent was definitely the most powerful he had ever seen in his life. Even Xian Xianghua could not compare to him. At this moment, he suddenly admired Xian Xianghua. The sect master was the sect master. Recruiting Zhou Xuanji as the vice sect lord was such a clever move. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes slowly and stared at Daoya old man. "Who said that the emperor's qi must be used on the emperor of the empire? I don't want to be the son of heaven, not because I'm afraid of anything, but because I really look down on it. One day, I will become the Sword Emperor. I want everyone to think of me, Zhou Xuanji, when they mention the Sword Emperor. Countless years later, the world will no longer have the 9 emperors of the Way of the Sword. There will only be me, Sword Emperor Zhou Xuanji." I want to create a sect or sanctum that belongs to the sword and lead you to ascend together. We will dominate the world and live a carefree and happy life." His words were sonorous and powerful, which made Jiang Shui and Huang Lianxin's eyes shine. Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, Bei Shao Wangjian, Han Shunbua, and Chongming Demon Monarch were all convinced. The little black snake sighed in amazement. "Heavens, my blood is boiling with excitement." Zhong Kueiming was also shocked by Zhou Xuanji's lofty aspirations. There were no more 9 emperors of the way of the sword in the world. There was only the sword emperor Zhou Xuanji. What kind of ambition did he have to say such words? Those ancient great emperors indeed had the emperor's qi, but that was 10,000 years ago. After the hegemon sword emperor ascended, there were no more great emperors in the world. Now, only Yang Di is qualified to chase after the great emperors. If you want it too, you will have to fight. Just like how an empire cannot have 2 monarchical violet qi, there cannot be 2 great emperors in an era, Daoya Old Man praised. Daoya Old Man praised Zhou Xuanji. This was the Zhou Xuanji he knew, who always looked higher than others. Zhou Xuanji said calmly, "Then I'll just step on him." How simple is that? Who didn't know how to brag? He had the confidence to do so. With the supreme legendary sword system and the Tianxia map, if he could not become the top cultivator in the world, he would not have the face to continue living. Then, we will wait for revered teacher to establish a sect. When the time comes, we will definitely support revered teacher. Xiao Jinghong said with a grin. Establishing a sword sect was naturally a good thing for a sword lover like him. Zhao Congjian nodded and said, "I want to be an elder." Just thinking about it made him excited. "Me too." Bei Shao Wangjian cried out, and the little black snake looked at him with disdain. "You can only be a sweeper." "Say that again?" "Humph." Recently, the 2 of them had been stepping on each other like they were in love. Then I will set a goal. 10,000 empires will worship the world's legendary sect." Zhou Xuanji nodded and said with a smile. Everyone's eyes sparkled. 10,000 empires will worship. What kind of sanctum would that be? All right. Stop bragging. Daoya Old Man quickly stopped Zhou Xuanji. This brat was good in every aspect, but once he started bragging, it was like a forest fire. It was very difficult to stop him. Zhou Xuanji looked at Zhong Kueiming and said, "You can go back now. I will not join the Tanhua sect. Tell Xian Xianghua to give up." His spirit energy was almost fully recovered, so he was not afraid to fight with Zhong Kueiming. "Are you sure? It's very difficult to start from scratch. How about this? Do you want to be the sect lord? I can recommend you to be the sect lord." Zhong Kueiming asked relentlessly. With these words, everyone looked at him strangely. "Be the sect lord? Aren't you afraid that Xian Xianghua will find trouble with you?" Zhong Kueiming could tell what they were thinking and said with disdain, "That old demonic woman is already heavily injured. Moreover, Yang Di has been suppressing her for a lifetime. It's very difficult for her to regain her prestige as the world's top cultivator. But you are different. Your potential is too great." At this point, his expression became excited. It was as though Zhou Xuanji was a rare treasure. Zhou Xuanji rolled his eyes and said, "Let's talk about it when your Tanhua sect is no longer in such a sorry state." The Tanhua sect was powerful indeed, but the name was too feminine. He did not like it. "Wait for my sect's ancient diabolical." Zhong Kueiming continued to persuade him, but before he could finish, he was interrupted by a voice. "The Tanhua sect is nothing. Join our Jiang clan and stand at the peak of the human race, commanding both the righteous and evil sects." This voice was majestic and domineering, which attracted everyone's attention. They saw a middle-aged man in a blue robe walking out from the depths of the forest. He had a majestic gait and a powerful aura. Chapter 205. Who are you? Xiao Jinghong raised his sword and asked in a deep voice. This blue-robed middle-aged man didn't look simple at first glance. His eyes seemed to be able to see through all of them, and the boldness he exuded from his every movement showed that he was someone who had been in a high position for a long time. Zhong Kueiming's expression changed slightly, and he said in a low voice, "Zhang Wudi, what are you trying to do?" Zhang Wudi. Number 3 in the world. Everyone's expressions changed. Jiang Wudi's ranking was even higher than Xian Xianghua's. No matter how powerful Zhou Xuanji was, he could not compare to Xian Xianghua for now. Jiang Shui's expression became even more complicated. Jiang Wudi ignored Zhong Kueiming and looked at Zhou Xuanji as he said, I saw the battle at Great Zhou's royal city. You are definitely a genius that only appears once every 10,000 years. Join the Jiang clan, and I will give you the best resources. Whatever you want, I will give you. I don't ask for anything in return. I just want to befriend you. If the Jiang clan is in trouble in the future, help us if you can. How about that? He spoke with sincerity and an appreciative smile hung on his face. He had already heard Zhou Xuanji's words. Especially that sentence, it left a deep impression on him. The world no longer had the 9 emperors of the Way of the Sword, only the Sword Emperor Zhou Xuanji. Very domineering. It was also to his liking. Zhou Xuanji replied calmly, What if I refuse? Because of Jiang Shui, he did not have a good impression of the Jiang family. Jiang Wudi shook his head and smiled. Who do you think I am? If you refuse, then so be it. Should I vent my anger on you because of that? What I want to do is to befriend you and sow good karma for the Jiang family. Zhong Kueiming looked displeased and hooted, Don't even think about it, Jiang Wudi. He's the sect leader of our Tanhua sect. Why would he be interested in your Jiang clan? Tanhua sect? Jiang Wudi smiled disdainfully and ignored him. Zhou Xuanji got up slowly and said, I can befriend him, but I have a question. Jiang Shui's grandmother was her only relative in the world, so he couldn't ignore her. You want to ask about her grandmother, right? Jiang Wudi pointed at Jiang Shui and asked Zhou Xuanji. When he heard that, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and say, You know. Jiang Wudi nodded and glanced at Jiang Shui. He did not show any agitation, nor did he look angry. He was very calm. She has the blood of the Jiang family in her, so I can naturally sense it. I came to the Great Zhou dynasty because of her grandmother. Back then, I personally chose a marriage for her grandmother, and her grandmother also agreed. Everything had been agreed upon, but a few days before the wedding, she was found to be pregnant. How could the Jiang family announce such a scandal? In the end, I could only send her away and announce that she had betrayed the clan. Jiang Wudi frowned. Every time this matter was brought up, he felt ashamed. Zhou Xuanji, Shao Jinghong, and the others frowned as well. In that case, the Jiang family had done nothing wrong. Instead, they had protected Jiang Shui's grandmother? Jiang Shui bit her lips and lowered her head. Zhou Xuanji held her hand and continued to ask, If so, why are you looking for her grandmother now? Seeing their actions, Jiang Wudi's brows suddenly relaxed. She obtained something, and someone wants to kill her. No matter what, she's still a member of our Jiang clan, so how can I watch with folded arms? The reason we captured her was to escort her back to her clan. Jiang Wudi replied and looked at Zhou Xuanji again. The more he looked at Zhou Xuanji, the more satisfied he was. When had the Jiang clan ever produced such a young man? Bool ****. You make it sound so simple. Isn't it because you want that thing? Why don't you tell me what it is? Zhong Kueiming snorted coldly, which made Jiang Wudi's face darken. Zhou Xuanji said, All right, let's leave it at that. In the future, I will bring Jiang Shui back to the Jiang clan to have a look. When that time comes, you must be the host. When Jiang Wudi heard this, he immediately smiled and agreed, Of course, no problem. Although he was the third in the world, he did not put on airs. Because he believed that this young man in front of him would become the top cultivator in the world. The top cultivator in the world was a height that he could never reach in his lifetime. Since that's the case, Clan Chief Jiang, please continue with your work. We still need to rest. Zhou Xuanji nodded and ordered them to leave. Jiang Wudi smiled and glanced at Jiang Shui before turning to leave. Soon, he disappeared into the depths of the forest. Zhong Kueiming snorted disdainfully. For this old guy to come personally, could it be that the Jiang clan member has the Tianxia map? Everyone's expression was strange, but they did not say anything. Zhou Xuanji stared at him and said, You can leave too. Say hi to Xian Xianghua for me. Zhong Kueiming became anxious immediately. How could he give up on Zhou Xuanji? At this moment, his expression changed suddenly. He cupped his fist toward Zhou Xuanji and quickly left. The others were stunned. Wasn't this guy's attitude changing too quickly? Chongming Demon Monarch mumbled. Could it be that Xian Xianghua is nearby? With this, Zhou Xuanji's expression changed slightly. That old demonic woman came again? He immediately said, "Let's leave this place quickly." The others had no objections and left immediately. Zhou Xuanji flew on his sword, and Jiang Shui hugged his waist as usual. She rested her face on his shoulder silently. "Don't think too much. We will go and find your grandma later," Zhou Xuanji comforted her softly. He comforted her softly. If Jiang Shui was unhappy, he would be depressed too. She was his source of joy after all. Jiang Shui replied softly and did not speak anymore. Evidently, she was thinking about her grandma. Jiang Wudi's words today messed up her heart. It was such a shameful thing for a girl to lose her chastity before marriage. She did not even know how to think about her grandma. Above the sea of clouds, a mountain peak appeared. Xian Xianghua, who was wearing a purple dress and a veil, stood at the edge of the cliff. Her hands hung naturally by her side as she looked into the distance. Zhong Kueiming suddenly appeared behind her. He knelt down on one knee and cupped his fist. "Greetings, Sect Lord." He did not dare to look up at Xian Xianghua. Evidently, he was very afraid. "You were very impressive just now," Xian Xianghua said. Her words frightened Zhong Kueiming so much that he immediately kowtowed, causing the ground to crack. "I was only trying to provoke him. I did not mean it," he replied in fear. If Zhou Xuanji and the others saw this, they would be speechless. "So you were just acting cool?" Xian Xianghua asked. "We must pull Zhou Xuanji into Tanhua sect. He can revitalize our sect. You have seen his talent. You should know what to do in the future, right?" Mentioning Zhou Xuanji, her eyes narrowed like two crescent moons. Her eyes were filled with joy. "Humph! Brat! Don't even think about escaping from me." "I know," Zhong Kueiming replied immediately. He asked carefully, "Sect Lord, could Zhou Xuanji be the 10,000-year prince that the ancient Diablo mentioned?" Xian Xianghua turned around slowly and said to him, "He should be. The 10,000-year prince's talent is unparalleled and rare. Once he is born, his cultivation will be unstoppable and will not face any bottlenecks." Zhou Xuanji reached astral projection in his early 20s. Can you believe that he is not the 10,000-year prince? 5th chapter. I said that I would do it no later than 5 chapters. Requesting for recommendation votes. I welcome all of you to add me on the WeChat chat page under the plus in the upper right corner. Search for the author, Ranhua Xiao, or RWX520233. I will often give spoilers or organize information about Celestial Sword. For some plots, I will also hold a poll. Everyone, please follow me. Chapter 206. Sect Lord is so powerful. Could it be that you knew he was the 10,000-year prince right from the start? Zhong Kueiming exclaimed with a tone of admiration. Back when Zhou Xuanji challenged the sword monarch of Great Zhou, although he was powerful, there were many people like him in the northern wilderness region. He was only challenging the sword monarch after all. If the sword monarch used his full power, he would not have been able to escape. At that time, Xian Xianghua was able to confirm that Zhou Xuanji was the 10,000-year prince and even bet the position of vice sect lord to Zhou Xuanji. He really admired her courage. Xian Xianghua smiled and did not speak. She thought in her heart, if you saw that brat obtaining the hegemon sword emperor's inheritance, you would think so too. Your identity has been exposed. Your next mission is to find out what Jiang Wudi is looking for. As for Zhou Xuanji, I have my own arrangements, Xian Xianghua said. Zhou Xuanji had already obtained the Tianxia map. What else could Jiang Wudi be so excited about? She was not sure, so she wanted to know more. Zhong Kueiming nodded. I'm preparing to revive the Diablo. Once he revives, our Tanhua sect will rise again, Xian Xianghua said intently. Hearing this, Zhong Kueiming's body trembled, and he did not reply. After that, Xian Xianghua waved her hand and asked him to leave. She turned around and walked to the edge of the cliff. Looking at the blazing sun at the end of the sea of clouds, she mumbled, Your era has passed. But I need your power. 7 days later. Zhou Xuanji and the others left Great Zhou and found a big and small heir. The two big guys hid in the forest and did not encounter any danger. The group stopped in the forest and began discussing about the crazy old woman. Once this is discovered, we will have offended the Jiang clan. Jiang Wudi will surely attack you to get rid of future troubles. Daoya old man looked at Zhou Xuanji and reminded him. Although Jiang Wudi was kind before, it was because there was no conflict of interest. Once they became enemies, and Jiang Wudi knew about Zhou Xuanji's potential, he would surely not hold back. Zhou Xuanji had already defeated Lin Guanyu, but he was still far from Jiang Wudi. Zhou Xuanji muttered, back then, her grandmother made such a grave mistake, but Jiang Wudi did not kill her. Now, for a treasure, he should not kill her either. We don't have to bring the crazy old woman along. The main thing is to see if she is safe. When the time comes, we will ask the crazy old woman to hand over the treasure, and we will settle her down. Back then, the crazy old woman abandoned Jiang Shui without saying a word, and she even owed her a huge debt. Maybe her debt was not much, and it was just compounded by interest. But in Zhou Xuanji's heart, she was already seen as a dishonorable person. Jiang Shui nodded and said, she only raised me for a few years. We don't have to go through fire and water for her. It wasn't that she was heartless, but this was her own matter. She couldn't let everyone risk their lives for her. Daoya old man divined with his fingers and closed his eyes. Chongming demon monarch shouted, what kind of treasure could be worthy of such a big shot like Jiang Wudi to come here personally? Could it be the Tianxia map? After all, the news of the Tianxia map being stolen had not spread. Xiao Jinghong furrowed his brows and said, the most troublesome thing now is that the great Zhou dynasty is so big. How are we going to find the crazy old lady? Perhaps they could use the power of Great Zhou to search for her, but compared to the Jiang clan, Great Zhou was still too weak. Just Jiang Wudi alone was enough to destroy the entire Great Zhou. I divined where she is. At this moment, Daoya old man opened his eyes and said. The others turned to look at him. These days, he had been divining the crazy old lady every day, but he had never succeeded. How did he succeed today? The empire is shrouded in fate, so it's not easy to divine. Back then, I spent a long time searching for Zhou Xuanji. I just divined that the crazy old lady has already left Great Zhou and is heading toward the south. Daoya old man replied with a proud look. See, you still have to rely on me. Let's not waste any more time. Let's depart now. Zhou Xuanji made up his mind immediately. He hugged Jiang Shui's waist and leaped onto Ah Big's back. The red Qilin followed Chongming demon monarch, and the group quickly flew out of the forest with Daoya old man leading the way. At the same time, the news of Zhou Xuanji killing Lin Guanyu spread across the northern wilderness region. Great Zhou's world changed. Everything that happened on the day of Ascension was dug up and became the topic of conversation for countless people. Zhou Xuanji's name shook the world again. Different from before, this time, he replaced Lin Guanyu and entered the Northern Wilderness Top 100. He was the youngest person to enter the Northern Wilderness Top 100 in history. At the same time, he was also the top rank on the Northern Wilderness Genius ranking. He was ranked on both lists and was the most famous. Xin Hao sect and Haoqi alliance could no longer sit still. Lin Guanyu had fallen. Would it be their turn next? After the two factions received the news, they communicated with each other tacitly and prepared to work together to eliminate Zhou Xuanji. Songhai Ziggurat gave Zhou Xuanji face and announced the Northern Wilderness Top 100 straightaway. Ranked 93rd in the world, Zhou Xuanji, the sword god in the human world, an eternal genius. Zhou Xuanji's name swept across the world like a storm. Great Zhou. Among the mountains, an old man sat on a giant rock. A dozen children were practicing their sword techniques on the grassy field in front of him. The oldest was almost 15 years old, while the youngest was only 6 years old. Even their swordsmanship seemed to be strenuous. The old man was Qiu Beili, an elder of the hidden sword sect. Looking at the children, he smiled as he stroked his long beard. He looked very amiable. A boy who looked a little over 10 years old stopped and walked up to him. Elder Qiu back then, sword god Zhou achieved great accomplishment in the sword's way when he was only 6 years old. Is it true or not? As soon as he said that, the other children also stopped what they were doing and surrounded him curiously. Ever since Zhou Xuanji's name shook the world, Great Zhou was swept up in the sword's way. Not long ago, Sword god Zhou killed Baba Blademaster and forced the sword monarch of Great Zhou to retreat. He became a legend straight away. For children of their age, it could be said that they had been hearing about Zhou Xuanji's legend since they were born. Qiu Beili said with a smile. Not only that. Zhou Xuanji started practicing the sword since he was 2 years old. With every year that he grows, he can master a new sword will. His talent is comparable to that of a god. Ordinary people cannot compare to him. He sighed in his heart when he mentioned Zhou Xuanji. Back then, outside the southern Snow Kingdom, when he first met Zhou Xuanji, this brat was still fleeing with little Jiang Shui. After 20 years, his name had spread across the world. He was more powerful than he expected. Now, in his eyes, Zhou Xuanji was already someone more powerful than Emperor Yan of Zhou. He could even be said to be one of the most powerful people in the world. He might not have the chance to see that brat again in this life. Qiu Beili sighed in his heart. Although it was a pity, he was happy for Zhou Xuanji. Elder Qiu, how did you know? A girl asked curiously with her bright eyes. It was the first time they heard about such things. They felt that Qiu Beili seemed to know Zhou Xuanji very well. They could always hear all sorts of secrets about Zhou Xuanji from Qiu Beili. Because I have lived longer than all of you. Qiu Beili smiled mysteriously. He did not tell them about his past with Zhou Xuanji so that he could stay out of trouble. Of course, he understood that even if he told them now, no one would believe him. Chapter 207. When the great Zhou's commoners sang praises for Zhou Xuanji again, he was still traveling around the border of Great Zhou. Sitting on Da's back, he cultivated quietly. The battle half a month ago made him more compatible with the Tianxia map. The speed at which the Tianxia map absorbed spiritual qi and provided him with spiritual power became faster. Sure enough, only by facing the limit could one have a big breakthrough. Zhou Xuanji was in a good mood, and he began to understand the wonders of the Tianxia map more and more. Jiang Shui, who was sitting in front of him, suddenly turned around and asked, Xuanji, if you were to establish a sword sect sacred ground in the future, where would you like it to be? The world was vast, and the mountains and rivers were connected. Choosing a place with good feng shui required a lot of time and a certain amount of insight. The great Zhou imperial city was surrounded by mountains on all sides. Spiritual qi gathered from all directions, as if the stars were surrounding the moon. The other dynasties had similar considerations. Zhou Xuanji thought for a while and said, if it were me, I would definitely choose the highest place. I would stand at the very top and look down on all the other mountains. Not far away, Northern Sword Valiant immediately turned around and said excitedly, I agree with this. The sight of it is daunting. The others also began to discuss. Back then, the 10,000 Swords Divine Ridge was formed by the convergence of countless tall mountains. It was majestic, and even the Hegemon Sword Emperor went to the 10,000 Swords Divine Ridge to study. Why don't we go to the desolate God Mountain in the south? It's said to be 10,000 feet tall. I might as well go to the Astral Essence World, which is above the cloud sea. TSK, you've already started planning? Will our sword sect take in demons in the future? Many of us demons also like to practice the sword. Hearing everyone's excited discussion, Zhou Xuanji smiled. He said, the sword sect isn't just about practicing the sword. The sword is their main profession. You can also teach them some things. Even if his future disciples were not omnipotent, they would at least have some other skills. Daoya old man chuckled and said, it's not that easy to build a sect. Of course, it's not difficult to occupy a mountain and become the king. Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, after this is over, we will find a place to stay and cultivate for a few decades. When your cultivation increases, we will establish our own sect and occupy a sanctum. After 1,000 years, we will ascend together. Everyone laughed. Even Jiang Shui smiled. This girl had been depressed for half a month, and her mood had finally cleared up. I've already sensed the crazy old woman's aura. We should be able to find her in half a day. Daoya old man said, changing the topic. Huang Lianxin asked, is Zhang Wudi by her side? Daoya old man shook his head and said, no, but... He had a strange expression on his face as if he wanted to say something. Chongming Demon Monarch glared at him and scolded, say it. The others tensed up. Could it be that something happened to the crazy old lady? There's demonic energy around her. Deoya old man said solemnly. Everyone was moved. Could it be that the crazy old woman had fallen into the hands of a demonic cultivator? Faster! Zhou Xuanji instructed with a deep voice, and the others immediately sped up. 6 hours later. Everyone came to a barren desert. Mountains rose and fell in front of them. Vegetation was sparse, and under the light of dusk, everything turned scarlet red. Zhou Xuanji said to everyone, "You all stay here for now, I'll go take a look. You all wait for orders." Behind him, where heaven and earth intersected, demonic chi soared into the sky. It was like a demonic nest, and waves of bone-piercing cold wind wreaked havoc on the earth. No one had any objections. After all, Zhou Xuanji was already the most powerful person in the group and was trustworthy. Jiang Shui held Zhou Xuanji's hand and reminded him, "You must be careful. If the situation is special, come back first." Zhou Xuanji smiled confidently. "Don't worry. If I want to leave, who can stop me?" After that, he dashed toward the place where the demonic chi was gathering with the 8-step sword lunge. He did not fly on his sword to avoid alerting the enemy. Deoya old man said to the group, "Cultivate quickly. I'll keep a lookout for all of you. See how powerful Zhou Xuanji is now. Don't be a burden." The group had no objections and sat down with their legs crossed. The red qilin laid on the ground and stared at the direction where Zhou Xuanji disappeared. It wagged its tail continuously. On the other side, Zhou Xuanji, who was using the qi obscuring incantation, came to a small mountain. He leaned on the mountain wall and looked out. There was a clearing in front of him, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. The light from the fire shone on the mountain walls. Hundreds of demonic cultivators gathered here. They cultivated around the bonfire while chanting scriptures in unison. Tanhua in the human world, Azura in Hades. A life of suffering, death is inevitable. Ascending to heaven to become an immortal, descending to become a demon. The thoughts of immortals and demons only ask the heart. If I give up my cultivation, what is there to fear? If I slaughter all lives, what is there to regret? Zhou Xuanji frowned. Tanhua sect again. Why is this demonic sect still haunting me? He looked around and saw only an old lady among the hundreds of demonic cultivators. She was wearing a tattered gray robe. Her hair was white, and her face was covered with blood marks. She looked eerie and horrifying. Could she be the crazy old woman? Did she join Tanhua sect? Strands of demonic chi seeped out from the demonic cultivators' heads and formed into a gigantic demonic head between the 3 mountains. The head swayed with the wind, and it was hard to discern its face. The highest cultivation is only at astral projection level 2. There's nothing to fear. Zhou Xuanji mumbled to himself. After that, he took out the dog-culling sword and walked up to the old lady with the 8-step sword lunge. The old lady opened her eyes in fear and cried out, "Enemy attack!" The other demonic cultivators jumped up and surrounded Zhou Xuanji with their enchanted artifacts. Zhou Xuanji stared at the old lady and said, "I'm here for Jiang Shui. You don't want to see her?" Having heard that, the old lady frowned, and her face looked even more horrifying. "Brat, who are you? Do you want to die?" A muscular man roared furiously. He held an axe in his hand, which was still stained with blood. Zhou Xuanji ignored him. They were just a bunch of ants. "Don't you want to see your granddaughter?" Zhou Xuanji asked with a frown. He looked at the old lady with hostility. She abandoned her granddaughter and joined the demonic sect. How heartless. What's your relationship with Jiang Shui? A pleasant voice came from behind him. Zhou Xuanji turned around to look. A beautiful woman in a black robe walked out. She had a delicate face and looked to be in her early 30s. She had an enchanting figure and emanated a mature charm. "It's none of your business," Zhou Xuanji said bluntly. He was in a bad mood. "I'm Jiang Shui's grandma." The black-robed woman replied with a complicated look in her eyes. Zhou Xuanji was stunned. He could not wrap his head around it. "Put down your enchanted artifacts. This person has great cultivation and is not someone we can deal with." The black-robed woman waved her hand and said. The other demonic cultivators put down their enchanted artifacts. "Who are you? Why are you looking for Amon?" She stared at Zhou Xuanji and continued to ask. Amon was the old lady's name. She looked at Zhou Xuanji with confusion. Zhou Xuanji smiled awkwardly and explained to the black-robed woman, I'm looking for you. I'm here to help Jiang Shui find her grandma. Where's the crazy old lady? Why is she so beautiful? He sized up the black-robed woman. Her eyes and eyebrows were somewhat similar to Jiang Shui's. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.